I got voicemail. This is the June 28, 2016 meeting of the Fairfield Town Plan and Zoning Commission. First item on the agenda are the meeting minutes from our last meeting, June 14, 2016.
Make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Alessi. Second by Commissioner Coleman. So, yeah.
Sorry, who moved and seconded that?
We had moved by Commissioner Alessi and seconded by Commissioner Coleman.
Thank you.
Commissioner Barrett was not in attendance at the last meeting, so who is sitting for Commissioner Barrett's?
Well, Mr. Barrett, so you'll have both sitting.
Both. Oh, for Commissioner Kennelly, right. Commissioner Kennelly is not here, so both of you are sitting. You were both at the last meeting, right? Yep. Terrific. Okay. Does everybody have a copy of the minutes? I reviewed those. I didn't have any corrections or additions. Anyone else? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And we have one abstention, Commissioner Barrett's. The minutes are adopted unanimously. Next item is 2515 Black Rock Turnpike, request of Consumers Petroleum for 100% release of a $13,780 bond pertaining to site improvements in the design commercial district.
Mr. Chairman, this was a zoning compliance. First of all, this is the 2515 Black Rock Turnpike is the Citgo station on the northerly edge of the commercial zone on Black Rock Turnpike. In 2010, that parking lot was expanded. And just recently, the last remaining remedial piece of work was done, and you have a report in your packet from our engineering department recommending 100% release the bond, and we concur with that assessment.
Okay.
Make a motion to release the bond.
Motion to approve release by Commissioner Alessi and second by Commissioner McAleese.
Are we both still voting?
I'm back. Right. Commissioner Barrett's is back on.
Mr. Noonan would be sitting for Mr. Kennelly.
Mr. Noonan is sitting for Mr. Kennelly. Okay. Any discussion? Seems all buttoned up. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? The bond is released unanimously. Next item is new applications to recommend a public hearing. 100 Nepis Road, re-subdivision application of Judy Cardello for 2 lots in an R3 zone.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, we're going to recommend that you take no action on this application. I heard from the applicant this morning that they intend to withdraw this application.
Withdrawn. Very good. So do we need to just...
I don't think you need to take any action. I'm expecting a letter of withdrawal to be received. If we don't receive that, then we'll put it back on for subsequent action. But at this point, I don't see any reason to take action on this item.
All right. Very well then. Next item is old business, 92 and 140 Bronson Road. Review of revised plans for 91-unit residential building pursuant to Connecticut General Statute, Section 830G. This proceeding is pursuant to a remand by the Connecticut Superior Court in the Residence A zone. It's not done.
The staff has a report that you received in the packet from Mr. Whittle.
Okay. Yep. Before I do that, I'm just going through the, and we have last noted on the agenda, we had that Commissioners Alessi and Ford had reviewed the video of the public hearing, and we have Wagner, Barrett, Coleman, Francis, and McAleese present. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is 6. So we would need.
Okay. Commissioner Noonan, you reviewed the tapes as well?
I have.
Okay.
Okay.
And you also?
Yes, but you don't need.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we have all of the regular members sitting plus Commissioner Noonan. Yes? All right.
Correct. Okay. Thank you. I will go through you have the staff report that was in your packet. I can go through it briefly if that is what you wish to do. As this commission knows, on July 22nd of 2014, this commission denied the original application of Garden Homes Management for a 95-unit affordable housing development submitted pursuant to Connecticut General Statute Section 8-30G. And at that time, the commission made these findings. Number one, there was sufficient evidence in the record to support a finding that the proposed development would pose substantial risk to public interest in health and safety. Number two, that those public interests clearly outweigh the need for affordable housing. And three, there were no reasonable conditions of approval that could be made to protect those public interests. After the applicant appealed that decision, Superior Court remanded the matter back to this commission, and a revised set of plans was submitted by the applicant on March 24th of this year. The modifications to the plan included the elimination of 4 parking spaces, the addition of 3 handicap parking spaces, which further reduced the parking count by 1 space, and the provision of a 2-foot reinforced shoulder along the entry drive. Due to the elimination of parking spaces, the unit count was reduced from 95 to 91 units. And it also should be noted that the 4 parking spaces eliminated are now striped as a fire lane. There was no redesign of the plan to provide for a turnaround. The fire lane is purported to be that area for truck turning movements. There was considerable discussion at the outset of the May 24th public hearing. The applicant argued the matter was remanded back solely to review the revised plan for fire trucks to turn around and to improve site circulation in the addition of a reinforced shoulder, making reference to certain paragraphs on pages 8 and 9 of the court decision for that opinion. In this commission, primarily through its chair, pointed to other aspects of the decision, particularly on page 9, quoting the ability of fire trucks to enter and turn around in the parking lot is an issue of health and safety. And the court advised the applicant should submit to the commission a fully engineered site plan indicating the provision of turning radii necessary to allow these and other large vehicles to turn around and exit the site with minimal reverse travel by the elimination of 4 parking spaces and 3 units as proposed by the applicant at the close of the initial hearing. The court also found that all the concerns identified in the commission's initial decision were substantial public interests in health and safety and other matters that were supported by substantial evidence in the record. Therefore, I think it was the conclusion of this commission that based on the language of the judge's ruling, the revised plan should be reviewed for access to the building by the fire department and its operations, entering and exiting the site, and that would also apply to larger vehicles, other large vehicles, I should say. At that May 24th hearing, the applicant's fire code consultant, Mr. Versteeg, opined that the project met the Connecticut Fire Code. The commission commented that Mr. Versteeg in the initial proceedings before the commission had advised the commission that he had not been to the site, and when asked if he had yet to visit the site, he replied that he had not. Upon further questioning about his initial opinions as it relates to his current position on the matter, Mr. Versteeg told the commission that the initial plans had complied with the fire code before any turnaround space had been provided. And the commission learned through the hearing process of the requirement of any drive longer than 150 feet required a turnaround, and it was not until the final night of the hearing that the applicant presented a sketch and represented 4 parking spaces would be removed, and that is why the plan was redesigned. I'm going to highlight some of the testimony you heard from Chief McCarthy from the fire department. The fire chief urged the commission to deny the revised plan and offered testimony regarding that the size and construction and configuration of the project requires the fire department to access the building. A lack of secondary access in the revised plan significantly impair the fire department's ability to access the property and its operations. The fire department is responsible for all the occupants of the building during an emergency, and there is no place for the residents to go or assemble during an emergency response. In his experience, in an emergency, residents will attempt to flee in their cars because they want to protect their investment and avoid being trapped on the site for an extended period of time. Up to 95 cars could be attempting to leave at the same time that a half a dozen or more emergency apparatus would be arriving. The Uniform Fire Code and NFPA standard requires secondary access when, in the opinion of the authority having jurisdiction, a single access road could be impaired or other factors necessitated. The fire department has responded 14 times since June of 2014 to the Garden Homes development on Fairchild Avenue, including a structure fire. That building has 54 units. For this building, the fire department expects to respond nearly 24 times annually or twice per month. In those situations, all 5 stations would respond to this site due to its size. And due to the limited access and space for maneuvering, all of the required equipment could not be deployed properly. This opinion is based on the chief's experience and is not imagined nor theoretical. He indicated there is no doubt that they would be there repeatedly. And when the department responds, if it is a larger scale emergency, they will be there for hours, quite a long time. The ladder truck will have difficulty accessing the roof. The turnaround area does not help fire department operations in the event of an emergency, nor improve access to the building, and is only useful when it is time for them to exit the site. There was further testimony from others that it is questionable that the fire trucks could even make the required multiple maneuvers in the space that was provided. The chief was asked directly if he thought the revised plan was safe, and his response was no. In addition, the commission asked Chief McCarthy if there were any alternatives available to address the concerns of the department, and the response was also no. Given all that you have seen and heard and read with respect to this, based on the review of the revised plans submitted by the applicant and the evidence that you have heard in this record, the commission must determine if there is support to make findings different from those made in the initial application. And if there is not, are there reasonable changes that could be made to protect interests in health and safety? And once again, those findings were, in the initial application, there was sufficient evidence in the record to support a finding that the proposed development would pose substantial risk to public interest in health and safety. Number 2, those public interests clearly outweigh the need for affordable housing. And 3, there are no reasonable conditions of approval that can be made to protect those public interests. That is the conclusion of our report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that summary. Commissioner Alessi?
I'll make a motion to approve for discussion purposes.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Alessi,
Okay, I'll second that.
seconded by Commissioner Barron. And I have comments, but I'll throw it open to see who'd like to start. You want to start?
Unless
Commissioner
No,
Alessi?
you can start. I'll go with you. You will or I will?
Sure.
Me?
Commissioner Barron.
Okay. This is a different application than we're used to hearing. It's not really an application, it's a remand. It's the first one I can recall that we've heard this. Again, commissioners are not all attorneys, nor are we expected to be. In fact, it's good if we're not all attorneys. Fortunately, we do have a couple attorneys on the commission, but we're required to understand the applicable laws. So in this case, what I did, as not an attorney, is I read the judge's decision, and he divided it into sections. And actually, there was some discussion about what was within our scope and what wasn't. And I actually agreed with most of what was said by the applicant and the chair. I mean, it's clear that, there's some sections where we had reasons for deny, the accessway width, and those reasons, initial denial was related to traffic and other things, not just fire safety, and that decision was reversed, as was the decision on sidewalks, as was the decision on inadequate parking, for various reasons. Again, as Mr. Wentz said, it was recognized that it was, I can't remember, if it was a legitimate public health and safety concern, but those decisions were reversed. Section D, however, which was titled, and I think I brought this up at the hearing, lack of a second access way to the apartment building, that's the judge's section, was not reversed. It was remanded for us to consider an alternate plan, which is what we need to do. And as I understand under 830G, reasonable changes to the plan. To deny something, you have to say that reasonable changes to the plan can't be made to it. So we were asked to consider a plan. The commission did not consider an offered alternative during the last night of public hearing. That was pointed out. For whatever reasons or not, doesn't matter. Now we are asked to consider it. But again, it was remanded to us. The decision was not reversed. So in looking at this and looking at the report of the fire chief, and first going back to the judge's wording, the judge states that he recognized the ability of fire trucks to enter and turn around in the parking lot is an issue of health and safety. And he also talks about other large trucks too, but it's recognized as an issue. And again, remand doesn't mean reverse, but orders to consider the revised plan. the plan was considered in detail. I'm not going to do it justice by pointing out the high points in the report of Commissioner McCarthy. Whether it went beyond its scope or not, maybe in some ways it did, but for the most part, it was looking at the revised plan, which we were ordered to consider, and the turnaround as an alternative to a secondary access, and the fire chief's determination was that the revised plan is not safe. Going to some specifics, really, which Mr. Wendt just read anyway, I think one of the key points that stood with me was the turnaround, which is what we're at to consider, does not help fire department operations nor improve access to the building, and is only useful when it is time to leave. So we have a revised plan in front of us. Our fire chief's got a report that says it's not safe. In rebuttal, or in other argument, Mr. Versteeg, again, presented before us. We heard him the first night of the public hearing. I'm just a little, sometimes you have an expert and then you have no expert. Here, I regard the fire chief as an expert. I have to. He's our fire chief, his experience. I'm not saying Mr. Versteeg isn't an expert, but on the first public hearing, where I remember correctly, and I think I was the one that questioned him on this, we sat through 3 nights. I think it might have been 4 nights, and there was no turnaround. And now we hear that he came out and said one of the basic tenets of this is that you have to provide a turnaround. Well, the initial plan didn't have one. And now, it took 4 nights to determine that, that initial plan is missing some basic tenets. So now with this revised plan, we've got kind of competing experts. I think there's a lot of evidence in the record to support that we have a lack of secondary access and that the revised plan is not safe as far as fire department operations. I'm not talking about anything else that was in the decision or any part that was reversed, just the part that we were asked to reconsider, I believe. So I can't really support approving this because I don't believe reasonable changes have been made, or changes have been made, but we still have a plan that's regarded as unsafe, and that is the standard, and I don't think it meets it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, I've given this a lot of thought, and I agree with you, Commissioner Barrett. I think we should start with considering the language of the decision. It was very significant to me that Judge Bates found that all of the concerns that we identified in our original decision constituted substantial public interest in health, safety, and other matters. We also found that they were generally supported by sufficient evidence in the record. So the court began its review by cabining the scope of the decision to a determination of whether, with respect to each of those concerns, 1, a denial was necessary to protect the identified interests. 2, the interests being protected are outweighed by the need for affordable housing. And 3, whether the interests can be protected by other reasonable changes to the plan. As you just mentioned, there were 4 separate topics reviewed by the court in sections A through D, 4 sections. The court first examined the width of the single access way in section A. Judge Bates recognized the significant site limitations. And it's important to review this part of the decision because it's really here where he identifies many of those site-specific limitations. He cited the proximity of the parcels to the I-95 entrance ramp and the non-access highway line. The court found that the setback relative to the entrance ramp precludes an access way greater than 20 feet, which was the width of the road that the applicant provided. We should note that the access way is 300 feet long and curves into the lot. We should also note that the fire code does require a turnaround for any access way that's longer than 150 feet. The court further recognized that wetlands on the interior of the lot prevent widening the access way to more than 20 feet as the access way continues into the site. So we have a site that's bounded on all sides by the railroad tracks, water courses, I-95, and the sole means of access to the site is this 20-foot wide access way. The court recognized that the width of the access way presents a substantial health and safety issue, but found that these concerns and the desirability of a 24 or 30-foot width did not outweigh the need for affordable housing in this case. That's at pages 5 to 6. Significantly, all else being equal, a 20-foot wide accessway should generally be sufficient for an affordable housing project. That's what the court found. In sections B and C, the court quickly found our concerns about the lack of sidewalks and the number of parking spaces were not sufficient to overcome the need for affordable housing in the town. He discussed that at pages 6 to 8. But that is not the end of the story, because the commission also denied the application on the basis that the plan did not provide a second means of access and an adequate turnaround. The court reviewed these concerns in section D, which Commissioner Barrett's noted is entitled "A Lack of a Second Access Way to the Apartment Building." This discussion was at pages 8 and 9 of the decision. In this section D, the court found that while a second means of access would be desirable in terms of safety, it's not necessarily required by the code and is not feasible for this site, just as the court found that an accessway wider than 20 feet is not feasible. The court noted the severe limitations present on this site. There's only so much land, and it is bounded by on all sides other than this accessway. Complicating matters, the plan did not provide an adequate means for a fire or other trucks to turn around, as Commissioner Barrett's noted. Perhaps if there were a sufficient turnaround in the parking lot or other features of the plan that would enable fire and safety vehicles to protect the health and safety of the public and the residents of this facility, a second means of access would not be necessary. And, as the court noted at the bottom of page 5, even if a plan in some way fails to meet applicable standards, the variation in compliance must be of such magnitude as to create a public health or safety concern that outweighs the need for affordable housing in the community. And that's the essence of 830G. Applicants need not comply with regulations so long as those non-compliance issues do not create substantial issues of public health and safety that are not outweighed by the need for affordable housing. Here, though, in the report submitted by the fire department, sitting as the AHJ, as Mr. Wendt described, we do have the recommendation that a second access way be provided, and this would accommodate the public health and safety concerns. Applicant's expert, Prestige, challenges this recommendation, but not on grounds of substance. He argued that the fire chief is not the AHJ under the code. I do not agree, but I also do not believe this is determinative of the issue. In any event, the fire marshal, who Mr. Versteeg testified, who he thought was the AHJ, in fact delegated review of the revised plan to the Deputy Chief of Operations Bisson, who prepared the fire department report. And I would just like to thank both Chief McCarthy and Commissioner Deputy Bisson for their work on behalf of the town and on this matter. As an aside, as I made clear during the hearing, I do not read the opening remarks of Deputy Bisson as an indication the fire department first learned of the project after the court's September 2015 decision. He was obviously referencing the revised plan that was submitted on direction from the court, and the fire department report was a review of that revised plan. Therefore, the issue is, given that we can all agree that a second access way would do the trick, and the fact that providing one is not feasible on this site, are there other changes that can be made to the plan to overcome this substantial public health and safety concern? So, we're not requiring a second access way. It's not feasible on this site, but we are required to consider reasonable changes to the plan that might ameliorate those public health and safety issues. Recognizing that the Commission had identified a serious issue of public health and safety during the original hearings, the applicant tried to modify their plan on the last night of hearings with a sketch of what it suggested was a new turnaround. Now, we refused to consider this sketch as it was not in the appropriate form, as the court found. It hadn't been reviewed by town offices, and members of the public hadn't seen it. The court did not take issue with our refusal to consider the sketch. Instead, the court agreed with our conclusion that the plan, as proposed, created health and safety concerns that outweighed the need for affordable housing, and remanded the matter with instructions to the applicant to submit fully engineered plans, as I will discuss. The court found that the ability of fire trucks to enter and turn around in the parking lot was an issue of health and safety. The court also found that this was also an issue regarding other types of trucks, such as delivery vans, etc., but to a lesser extent. The question before us is whether the revised plan ameliorates these concerns, and if not, whether the concerns continue to outweigh the need for affordable housing. And if so, whether there are reasonable changes that can be made to the plan to protect those public interests. I will not try to summarize all of the evidence and testimony presented at the hearing. That's part of the record. I do find the Fairfield Fire Department report to be credible, and importantly, none of the findings in that report were rebutted by the applicant. Applicant's fire expert, Mr. Versteeg, testified that the purpose of his review of both the revised application and the original application was to determine whether the plans met the code. And it is his opinion that both do meet the minimum standards embodied in the code. I have visited the site, and Judge Bates visited the site. Mr. Versteeg never visited the site. I drive past the site all the time. I drove past it on my way to this meeting tonight. The fire department has visited the site and is familiar with town experience in responding to alarms, fighting fires, and providing the health and safety of our citizens. As Mr. Wendt described, the chief recited various statistics about responding to emergencies at the other Garden Homes development in town. These issues are real, and we must take note of that. Inherent in the court's decision is that, although it may be said by Mr. Versteeg that the original plan met the minimum standards of the code, this was insufficient under the circumstances and created a health and safety concern that outweighed the need for affordable housing in Fairfield. Not that we don't need affordable housing in Fairfield. We all share the view that we need more affordable housing, but that the plan proposed for this site, as applicant had in the original application, created a risk to health and safety that outweighed the need for affordable housing at this location as proposed by the applicant. Mr. Versteeg's opinion that the original plan met the minimum standards required by the code is significant because the court held in this instance that was not sufficient, and the particularities of this application created issues of health and safety that outweigh the need for affordable housing. This is significant because Mr. Versteeg's opinion of this revised application is nothing more than that. He opined that the revised plan simply meets the minimum requirements of the code. He testified that the original plan included a means for trucks to turn around, and this revised plan also includes a means for trucks to turn around. He said it's just better. Applicant, however, did not provide a, quote, turnaround as the code imagines. There is no hammerhead, Y, or even a K-turn. The fire code includes definitions for, quote, turnarounds, such as hammerheads, cul-de-sacs, and other designs that provide for fire trucks to make K or Y turns, and this new plan does not incorporate any of those designs. Instead, the new design merely stripes what were formerly 4 parking spaces into a new fire lane in which the applicant contends a fire truck can turn around. The record on the initial application contains types of designs that could provide adequate area to do so, which are referenced in the NFPA code. The revised plan submitted by the applicant showed turning movements that require, at a minimum, a W, and a driver of a truck would likely require many more turning movements as someone in that situation would likely not get the precise turning movements correct on the first try. It's a very tight space. All they did was stripe of 4 spaces as a new fire lane, and this purported means for trucks to turn around is limited. A large moving truck, such as a tractor trailer, could not maneuver once inside the site. Indeed, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, for a tractor trailer to back out of the site once down the 300-foot curved accessway. Applicant did not address this. At the end of the day, we are tasked with a huge responsibility. We must determine whether, given the revised plans, our town fire and police resources would be able to adequately protect the health and safety of the residents of our town and of this proposed facility in emergency situations. We must evaluate this in a variety of circumstances, such as when there is snow and ice on the ground, when there are plowed roads and snow piled up along the length of the accessway, and around the parking areas. When there is a fire event and all the residents are evacuated, and the fire trucks must fight a fire on the back or on one of the side faces of the building that is not directly accessible. I would note there the various portions of the report that indicate the problems with fighting fires at this building, given the location of the accessway, the parking lot, and the railroad tracks bordering on the right side of the building. It bears noting that a close reading of the applicant's written rebuttal to the fire department's report is limited to citation of the code and not a factual or substantive rebuttal to the contentions articulated in the report. Mr. Versteeg seems to say that the fire department will just have to figure it out. Well, the fire department has analyzed the plans and the site for pre-planning purposes and has determined that they have not been given a proposal that they can support. The fire chief asked us to deny the application for health and safety reasons. If the minimum requirements of the code were indeed satisfactory, then we would not be here today, since Mr. Versteeg contends the original plan met the minimum requirements of the code, but the court agreed with us and held this was not sufficient. So what are we doing here today? The court directed the applicant to submit to the commission a fully engineered site plan indicating the provision of the turning radii necessary to allow these and other large vehicles to turn around and exit the site with minimal reverse travel, both via the elimination of 4 spaces and 3 units as proposed, and by alternate means. That's at page 9. I note that applicant did not submit any plans for any alternate means. So we must evaluate the only plan they did submit, which was to provide a reinforced shoulder on the accessway, eliminate 3 units and 4 parking spaces, and stripe a new fire lane in place of those 4 parking spaces. We must do so not as applicant contends, which is simply to determine whether the plan provides a means for a fire truck to turn around. We must analyze this in light of the purpose for which such functionality is necessary to protect the health and safety of the public and the residents of this facility. To do otherwise would make no sense, inasmuch as applicant contended the original plan provided means for trucks to turn around, and the court agreed with our original determination that the original plan, quote, created a health and safety concern that outweighed the need for affordable housing, close quote. It's at page 8. We must evaluate whether that turnaround is effective for its purpose to protect the interests of the public in health and safety. Put another way, are there issues of health and safety presented by this revised plan? And if so, do those risks outweigh the need for affordable housing as they did in the original plan? Lastly, if there are issues that compromise public health and safety, are those issues such that they outweigh the need for affordable housing? Then we must determine whether the public interest cannot be protected by reasonable changes to the affordable housing plan. There is substantial evidence in the record to support a finding that the revised plan is not sufficient to protect the health and safety of the public and the residents of this proposed facility. I cite to the fire department report, which, as I mentioned, is not rebutted in any meaningful way by applicant. Indeed, applicant's expert for Stieg never visited the site, testified his sole purpose was to opine whether the plan met the minimum requirements of the code, which he contends it does. But as I discussed before, merely meeting the minimum requirements of the code is not always sufficient, and in this case, it was not sufficient, which is why the court agreed with our findings in this regard. This is not merely a matter of convenience. Under Section 830G, a proposal need not even meet minimum regulations so long as those deviations from regulations do not create a substantial issue of public health and safety, and even if they do, those issues must further outweigh the need for affordable housing. Here, the unrebutted evidence in the record supports a finding that the revised plan does not ameliorate the health and safety concerns presented in the original application. I have looked at this from many different angles, many different perspectives. I must conclude that the revised plan creates substantial issues of public health and safety. Just as the fire department explained, even without any complicating factors such as winter weather when snow is piled up in banks along the side of the accessway and around the parking areas. Neither does the plan, quote, provide the ability of fire trucks to enter and turn around in the parking lot, close quote, sufficient to ameliorate the issues of public health and safety outlined in the record. To a lesser extent, these same issues are presented with respect to moving and large delivery trucks. It is significant that applicant did not present any reliable testimony with respect to moving and delivery trucks. The court required applicant to submit alternatives, but the applicant did not do so. I asked the fire chief directly if he could fashion some alternatives that would accommodate the issues identified in his testimony and the evidence. He said he could not. He said the current plan is a substantial health and safety risk. He said he is not an engineer or an architect, and this is well taken. We too are not engineers or architects. As the court stated, though, we do have the burden of proving that the public interest cannot be protected by reasonable changes to the affordable housing plan. The chief testified that other projects, which incidentally have plans that do not strictly comply with certain fire code regulations, were effective to provide adequate means for public safety organizations to protect the public health and safety. We talked about another project in Fairfield that we recently approved under Section 830G, and he noted that in that project there were several buildings as opposed to one big building as we have here, and there was a large hammerhead in that parking lot, and that the buildings are close to public roadways, as opposed to here where there is a single 300-foot long, 20-foot wide accessway with a big curve in it. As the court recognized, this site has severe limitations, and certain mechanisms that we might envision to accommodate the substantial issues of public health and safety are not feasible. Therefore, I believe there are no reasonable alternatives that we can offer. And for all those reasons, I would urge all of us to oppose the motion to deny. And unless anyone has any other substantial comments, I would ask that Commissioner Alessi amend his motion to adopt my comments as our collective statement.
I would like to make an amendment to change my motion to include your comments.
Commissioner Barrett?
I think a collective statement is a great idea. I support that. I just confused because Commissioner Alessi's first motion was to approve, wasn't it? Not to
Right.
deny. So we have a motion to approve,
Correct.
but we want to adopt a collective statement in voting on that.
That's right. And so the mechanism would be to, my suggestion would be to vote in the negative to defeat the motion to approve for the reasons in this collective, the reasons I explained as a collective statement of the commission.
I'm good with that. I
I have no problem with it.
amend the motion.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve on the table, which, actually, that is a little complicated,
Yeah,
isn't
he
it?
can withdraw
Because
that.
you
No,
can
I'm going to withdraw the
withdraw.
motion.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's just read, I'm going to withdraw the motion, make it a motion to deny, and using your comments as our collective statement base for the DPZ.
Okay.
That makes more sense.
I will second that. I think in this case, that would be better.
I think you're right. I was trying to squeeze it into the motion as it was framed,
Yeah, we-
and
It's always a question whether to make a motion
that,
to deny.
that wasn't working. So, thank you. Okay, so, we have a motion to deny, and adopt my comments as the collective statement as the commission.
We have a second?
Motion by Commissioner Alessi and seconded by Commissioner Barris.
You guys
So-
good on that? So it's a motion to deny.
Does anyone have any other comments that they wish to make? We can discuss what is now on the table as a proposed collective statement. We can add to that collective statement if others have comments or issues or citations that they wish to add to it. If somebody thinks that something I've said is not entirely accurate, or it doesn't reflect what that individual commissioner thinks should be part of our collective statement, we can change it. I want to make sure that everybody's got an opportunity here to have their voice heard, and that this truly reflects all of our collective intentions. Commissioner Francis?
Mr. Chairman, you incorporated the fire chief's report, right?
I did, yes, I did.
Because I was especially impressed with the collapse zone and up to 90 cars evacuating at once.
Mm-hmm, yes.
Just
And I
no
think
way.
as a predicate to that,
Should include the staff's comments, maybe?
include the staff's comments as well. There were, I didn't try to comb the record for specific citations to different evidence, so I think that's actually a good idea to
Amended to include the staff's comments, reports as well.
in our collective
In our
statement.
collective statement. Good. That's it.
I'm good with that, although this time the staff doesn't recommend in their
No.
approval or denial. It was just like a statement of fact, but I agree with everything that's contained in there, and I would make that as part of, I would be comfortable making it part of our collective statement.
Okay. So we could fashion the collective statement using the staff report as a factual predicate, and then adopting my comments as an analysis.
Well, the staff report does go into some detail about the chief's comments that were put on the record.
Yep.
And it just reiterates it is really what it does.
Yeah,
So, we have that there.
all right.
And, sorry, Mr. Chairman, one
Yep.
one more comment. I mean, I think this is, I mean, there's nothing that you stated that I didn't agree with, and I think this collective statement is important, because we get a lot of applications, I mean, none as unique as this one, where we might deny it and we might have different reasons. I mean, I've heard people deny things, and I don't agree with what they said, or we approved it, and we voted for the same thing, but for different reasons. You know, and then the staff does a great job normally of putting in like 3 or 4 or 5, whatever points about the reasons for conditions of approval. They put it into better words than we probably fashion, or reasons for denial. Here, I think it's important that, you know, for this application, because it's a remand, that we kind of have some sort of a collective statement. And again, there's nothing that you stated that I have any issue with whatsoever. I think, you know, I'm very comfortable adopting that as a collective statement myself.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right, so to reiterate, the motion on the table is to deny and adopt the staff report and my comments as the collective statement of the commission. Are we ready to vote? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? All right, motion carries unanimously. Next item on the agenda is 901 Kings Highway, special exception application of Calvin United Church for a daycare facility in the design commercial and the residential C zones.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, I was not here for items B, C, and D last time, so I'll be off of all these, just to let you know.
Sure, if you want to jump in.
Yeah.
Commissioner Alessi?
I would just like, you know what, I mean, I'd like to see Commissioner Barrett's, get a chance to look at the tape, and I want to get more up to speed on this, so I'm just going to make a motion to table this before we go any further, if anybody has any problem with that.
Motion to table by Commissioner Alessi. Do I have a second?
I second it.
Second by Commissioner Coleman. So, thanks. I'm actually happy to hear the motion tonight. Obviously, the other matters before us, I spent a considerable amount of time on, and I would like some more time on this too, so I would ask that we support this motion.
Is that just for item B or for item D?
901.
901 Kings Highway.
Item B,
Yeah.
901 Kings Highway. Yep.
I mean, I can vote on it. I'm comfortable with that, and I will definitely watch it and be ready for it the next meeting.
Okay. Good. All right, any other comments on that motion? Okay. Motion to table by Commissioner Alessi, seconded by Commissioner Coleman. Okay, ready to vote? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion to table carries unanimously. Next item is 5151 Park Avenue, special exception application of Sacred Heart University for a new athletic building in an R3 zone.
Mr. Chairman, I will give you a brief overview of what was presented to the commission and at the hearing, and then just briefly outline your conditions of approval findings that you need to review whenever you receive a special exception application like this. As stated, the Sacred Heart University is proposing construction of an end zone athletic building to be located at the southern westerly corner of their campus at 5151 Park Avenue. The proposed building will have a total footprint of approximately 22,119 square feet, supporting 2 stories and a basement. The total building area proposed is 36,848 square feet. Currently, the property is an open gravel area with some rock outcroppings, which is used for an outdoor functions at this time. It is adjacent to the SHU's on-campus sports stadium. To the north, the entire site ranges from impervious rock to pervious loose gravel and manicured lawn. The site has an existing access way to Park Avenue via the campus roadway network. A new driveway and parking lot is proposed for this development. Accompanying the proposed end zone building is the construction of a new turf field over existing tennis court east of the proposed new building. The proposed end zone building will be used primarily by the general student population with limited Sacred Heart athletic team use. The basement of the proposed end zone building contains various locker rooms and offices, as well as a bowling area featuring bowling lanes and bleachers. The first floor features a multi-purpose practice court, as well as various offices and a lounge area. Several large rooms are dedicated to workout regimens such as yoga, aerobics, and spinning. The second floor includes an extensive area for exercise machines and cardio equipment. This level also includes a running track that extends along the perimeter of the building. The top level of the building contains a canopy area with a multi-purpose room and coffee juice bar overlooking the football field. Proposed end zone building construction includes the use of brick, aluminum panels, aluminum and glass windows, and a standing seam metal roof. This use is a permitted use subject to securing a special exception as defined, in Section 27 of our zoning regulations. In Section 27.4, there are finding requirements that the Commission must review and find in determining and acting on this particular special exception. Just to, again, briefly remind you of those conditions, Section 27.4.1, the location, type, character, and size of the use and building structures shall be in harmony with and conformity with appropriate and orderly development of the area. 27.4.2, the nature and location of the use and building structure shall be such as will have adequate fire protection. And 27.4.3, the street serving the proposed use shall be adequate to carry prospective traffic. Provisions shall be made for entering and leaving their property without creating undue hazard to traffic or congestion, and adequate off-street parking shall be provided. That, Mr. Chairman, is a brief overview of what was proposed and what your finding requirements are for this application.
Thank you. Commissioner Alessi?
I'll make a motion to approve this application.
Motion approved by Commissioner Alessi. Seconded by Commissioner Coleman.
Kudos to Attorney Fitzpatrick and everybody at Sacred Heart University. They put together what looks like an amazing athletic building, state-of-the-art. Looks like they have thought of everything, including a golf simulation room. But this university really knows how to do things right, and I think this is just another example of it, and I hope everybody on this commission supports this application.
Thank you. Commissioner Coleman?
I see no reason not to support it. It's entirely contained within the Sacred Heart land. It's unlikely to have any impact on the neighbors. The building is gorgeous. Go for it.
Very good. Thank you. Anyone else? I agree. Well done. Nice application. I think that all of the determinations are met under the special exception requirement, and I think we should all support this.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner McAleese?
I agree with everything that's been said. It's a beautiful building, really nice design, nice use of the landscape. I drove through last week, and I haven't been on the campus in quite a while, and it's really an impressive growth, not overly so, tasteful, and I give them a lot of praise. Kudos to Sacred Heart.
Very good. Anyone else? Okay, so Commissioner Barrett's is off, and Commissioner Noonan? No, Commissioner Noonan?
Both.
Both. Oh, for
Commissioner
Kennelly,
Noonan is
right.
on for Mr. Kennelly.
Right.
Mr. Corcoran would be on for Mr. Barrett's.
Perfect.
And we need to note whether or not Commissioner Francis watched the, so you watched the video. Okay, fine. So
Very good.
So
So it's everybody, except Commissioner Barrett's?
correct.
Very good. Okay, we ready to vote? Now, motion is to approve. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And none, and Commissioner Barrett abstains. So the item is approved unanimously. Next item is 452 Brookside Drive, special exception application of Chabad Lubavitch of Fairfield, Inc. for additions and renovations to establish a place of worship in the A zone.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, again, I want to briefly overview the proposal and then go over the findings, which are relatively similar to what you just heard for a special exception application. The owner of the property at 452 Brookside Drive seeks the approval to establish a place of worship. The property is located in a residential A district, and the use is permitted in this zone subject to special exception application pursuant to our provisions of our section 5.1.4D. The property was previously utilized as a location for the Elk Club for many years. The proposal includes provision for a small addition to an existing building and the raising of the existing structure above the base flood elevation in order to bring it up to our FEMA compliance requirements. The construction of a new single-family residence to be used by the rabbi and his family is also proposed. As shown on the site plan architectural plans, the area assembly has a capacity of 190 seats. Pursuant to our provisions of section 28.6.4 of the regulations, 38 parking spaces are required. In addition, 2 on-site spaces are required for proposed residents, bringing the total parking requirement to 40 spaces, which is provided, as seen on the site plan. On February 10, 2016, the Conservation Commission, acting as the Inland Wetland Agency, unanimously approved the Inland Wetland Permit application with respect to this proposed new construction. Religious services will include monthly Friday evening services commencing at 6 p.m. Similarly, Saturday morning services are held once per month, commencing at 9:30 a.m. Holiday services that occur annually will include high holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, during the early fall. There are approximately 6 other holidays during the year when religious services will be conducted. The applicant will also conduct religious school to be held for children between the ages of 6 and 13 that will meet once a week. Classes are held on Sunday mornings between 9:45 and 12 p.m. Adult education programs are also planned, will involve a Thursday evening classes. Office staff will be 2 to 3 individuals that will occupy the building weekends throughout the year between the time of 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. The proposed main building height proposed is 30 feet, 9 inches. The ground floor area is 6,800 890 square feet, and the total square footage of the main building would be 13,784 square feet. Proposed parsonage house has an elevation height of 31.5 feet. The ground floor area is 1,947 square feet, and the total floor area is 4,918 square feet. The current site has unrestricted access to Sant Mortar Drive at the intersection of Brookside Drive. Access is also provided on Sant Mortar Drive approximately 125 feet north of Brookside Drive intersection, approximately 300 feet north of Brookside Drive intersection. The proposed plan is that the northerlymost access drive will be limited to right turn in and right turn out movements only. Along with the construction of the new sidewalks and aprons, vegetation will be removed within the public right-of-way along the northbound travel lane of Sant Mortar Drive between the northerly access drive and the intersection of Sant Mortar Drive to further improve sight lines between northbound and westbound approaches to the intersection. The Sant Mortar Drive, located 125 feet north of Brookside Drive, will be maintained as a full movement access drive. The access drive at the intersection of Sant Mortar Drive and Brookside Drive will be shifted east on Brookside Drive and be converted to ingress only. The future Brookside Drive ingress will serve as a drop-off pickup loop at the front of the synagogue and will connect with the parking facility to the north. Again, all this was shown to us on the site plan at the hearing. There is also access from Brookside Drive to 2 handicap parking spaces. It was recommended or discussed at the hearing that this access and these spaces be adjusted so that utilization of them will not require backing out onto Brookside Drive. There also was an issue about access to one of the doorways at the parsonage. I believe the commission did receive revised plans showing not only the door entrance issue, but also a adjustment of the handicap spaces so that, again, utilization of them will not require any type of backing out into the public right-of-way. That, again, real quickly, is what was submitted to the commission and the brief discussion that we had on the access issue. The only other thing I'll mention to you is very similar to what you just heard for your the other public hearing item, is that because this is a special exception, you have findings in our section 27 regulations that you need to find when acting on this. And again, I'll just briefly go over those. They're very similar to what you just heard. They're in section 27.4. And again, that the location, type, character, size of the building and structures shall be in harmony with and conform to the appropriate order of development of the area. That the nature and location, the use of the building or structure shall be that there is adequate access for fire protection, and that the streets serving the proposed use shall be adequate to carry prospective traffic. Provisions shall be made for engineering, entering and leaving the property without creating undue traffic hazard and congestion, and that adequate off-site parking is provided. All those issues were described to you with the site plans at the public hearing. That, Mr. Chairman, is a real quick overview of this application.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Corcoran.
I move that we approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Corcoran,
I'll second that.
second by Commissioner Alessi. Mr. Corcoran?
I just have one question from Joe. Did you say there was off-site parking in the last sentence you said?
Excuse me? I'm sorry.
The second to the last sentence you read, did you say something about off-site parking?
Off-street parking, I'm sorry.
Off-street, okay.
It's on-site parking. There's no
Right.
off-street parking proposed.
Okay. So
Off-site
I think
parking.
this is an attractive building that will go well in the neighborhood. I think that it's a good use, and that we heard a lot of neighborhood support for this. I don't see a reason to deny it since it meets the rules.
Excellent, thank you.
I'd like to just...
Commissioner Alessi.
Sorry, I'd just like to make a comment that I would hope Commissioner Corcoran would like to make his approval based on the revised site plans that we received. showing a change in the parking lot and the trees and everything else.
Yes, I looked at the plans and they do correct what,
Yeah,
the
it was-
issues I had before.
It was Commissioner Corcoran that pointed out the various issues with the plans during the hearing. Appreciate that. You know, the other, if I'll just put this in while we're making possible amendments. We heard some testimony from members of the public that they would like for us to recommend to the town to install a crosswalk at that intersection leading to the beach area, or the pond, is that pond? Yeah, it's pond. And I thought that was an excellent suggestion, which could be handled while, you know, the site is under construction. It would be great. Would you like to add that to your motion?
Yes, let's add that
I'll
condition.
second.
Okay, Commissioner Corcoran adds that recommendation to
Yeah,
the
that would be,
motion.
that we would recommend that they make that request to the police commission for them to consider that.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But we can, though, affirmatively recommend to the police department to
Sure.
add that, right?
Right. You can certainly make that recommendation, but with the understanding that if the police commission reaches a different conclusion, it doesn't invalidate your action.
Correct.
Right, just wanna make-
The limit, yeah.
Right.
No,
The only thing here that the police commission is gonna have to wrestle with is, I believe, one of the legs of that intersection is not stop sign controlled. So they have to decide whether that's safe or unsafe to have a crosswalk at a partially unsigned intersection, and there's reasons for that because of the slope, but that's within their discretion. You
Right.
can certainly make that recommendation to them, and we have done so in the past. I just wanted to...
Okay, very good. Well, it's now part of the motion, and it's been seconded. Other comments? Commissioner McAleese?
I would just like to add, I really think, again, here we have another case of a nicely put together presentation, beautiful drawings, an applicant that is listening to the concerns of their neighbors and trying very hard and conscientiously to be a good neighbor. And it's a great use for the site, so I'm going to vote to approve this.
Thank you. Yeah,
I think
Commissioner
it's an
Francis?
excellent use of the site. It'll really benefit the community.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the site needs to be cleaned up. Obviously, it's become somewhat dilapidated. The plans for renovation look fantastic. I think all the considerations under 27 are met, harmony with the neighborhood, not undue traffic, et cetera. You know, all of those are met. I appreciate the applicant changing the plans on the upper corner on Brookside to cut back the foliage and include curb cuts and sidewalks and aprons. I think that's a huge improvement to that portion of the property. And, you know, the landscaping plan looks great. I think it's going to be great, you know, along the street. Anybody else? Ready to vote? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? One abstention, Commissioner Barrett's. All right. The item is approved with conditions unanimously. Next is public hearing. I'm just going to adjourn for a quick 5-minute break before we start the public hearing. Meeting back to order. Thanks very much. Sorry for the delay. First item for public hearing is 2333 Sherman Street, special permit application of 23 Sherman Street LLC pertaining to a new 3-story mixed-use commercial and residential building in the Center Design District.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, members of the commission, ladies and gentlemen, I'm John Fallon. I'm an attorney here in Fairfield, Connecticut, and I'm pleased to be representing 23 Sherman Street LLC. The principals of that entity are here tonight, Mike Fazio and David Herbst, and I'll speak about them a little bit more as we go on. This application is to approve a mixed-use development at the properties located at 23 and 33 Sherman Street. Once constructed, should you approve it, as we hope you will, It's going to consist of 1,997 square feet of retail space on the first floor, 3,190 square feet of office space on the second floor, and 2 residential units, as shown on the plans, located on the third floor. The office space will be the relocated home of the firm of Karen and Fazio, and that is where we come to these gentlemen, who are not only the developers of the property, but looking to take a long-standing and well-regarded business in Fairfield and put it in a permanent home where they'll have an ownership interest. Karen and Fazio, so you know, are very well-regarded real estate appraisers, a real estate appraisal company. They do work all over the state, for municipalities, for individuals. They did the 2010 Fairfield revaluation for the town of Fairfield. And I'll say a few more things about them in a minute as it relates to the nature of their work. Now, the properties that we are assembling here, 23 and 33 Sherman Street, consist of a total of 12,593 square feet. They're, of course, located in the Center Design Business District, and they presently have on them 2 pre-existing and legally non-conforming residences on the properties. They're non-conforming because obviously they existed before the commercial zoning where residential use, except in a mixed-use concept, is not permitted. The project that we propose to you tonight does constitute a permitted use in the zone, as section 12.3.3 allows business and professional offices, 12.3.4 allows retail, and 12.3.16, subject to the provisions of section 12.3.16, allows residential use. And we do comply with all the provisions regarding residential use as set forth in section 12.3.16. With regard to the parking, we are providing 18 spaces. Pursuant to section 28.6.1, we're proposing a reduction of 2 parking spaces with regard to the residential units. As the Commission has found and is aware of, you have in your own regulations the authority in a mixed-use context to reduce the residential parking requirement by 50%. We're asking you to do that. The reason that you put that in your regulations is that residential occupants in such mixed-use developments generally are found to utilize the space substantially during periods when the office and retail tenants are closed, for example, after business hours and on weekends, and thus the 18 spaces for this type of a development should be more than appropriate. I think that's particularly true here because of the nature of the office tenant. Karen and Fazio, as I said, is a real estate appraisal company. There's 4 full-time employees. There's 2 other people who come and go on a part-time basis. But the key is come and go, because the nature of their work is they're appraising property. So this is not a situation like a law firm or a doctor's office where patients or customers or clients are coming. They are generally out in the field looking at property, and they do their work in terms of writing reports and stuff when they are back at the office. But in fact, there's 4 full-time employees in this office area, which only again makes us very confident that the 18 parking spaces that do comply with your regulations, subject to your waiver of the 2 for the residential, will be appropriate. One bit of housekeeping before I go on. We received an email today that Mr. Wendt sent to us that Bill Kenny, the town engineer, sent on today, June 28th at 10:05. Bill, who did they say? Bill Kenny. Bill Kenny is here. This is the first sign. You always remember, say, remember that night in June when we first realized Fallon was starting to go the other side? And then there was that downhill spiral, and it was terrible. So,
Very dark.
very dark. It was
Very
sad to
dark.
watch, wasn't it? Because he had been good at one point. Oh, did you last year? They've been talking behind my back. So anyway, Bill Hurley got us this memo today, and you know, Bill has been working extremely hard with Laura Pooley being out. We hope she'll be back soon. But anyway, if you have it or you don't, it's obviously part of your file because it came to your planner today. And in it, Bill makes 8 comments. They're all technical in nature. 2 of them involve certain questions with regard to the drainage report. We've submitted through staff tonight a revised drainage report that addressed those two concerns. Obviously, you'll have an opportunity to have that go to Bill and be reviewed. And then his other comments, all related to very minor tweaks in the site plan, showing an aisle width that wasn't there, showing the dimension of parking spaces that weren't there but now are. So we've also submitted this afternoon to staff. We got this at 10:05 today, but we've submitted this afternoon, through the good efforts of Mr. Jane, revised plans. So you have a revised plan, and the only revision to those plans are to address Mr. Hurley's comments.
Was the original application submitted after you made revisions to comply with the code enforcement
Yes.
issues?
Yes, and these are just some additional things, and they're not major in nature, but we thought we'd clean them up since Bill
Right.
brought them up.
Okay.
But yes. And I'll talk to the code, or at least reference it
Yep.
momentarily. So you do have a revised plan. We've provided 12 copies of that. And I won't go over the 8 points, but I'm sure Mr. Wendt either has or will give you Mr. Hurley's memo, and you'll see what those matters are that we're dealing with.
So this is one site and utility plan which replaces which document? Plan application. Okay. Go ahead. I don't
Okay.
wanna-
Site and lighting.
Second page of this
one.
Second page of that one, got
The
it.
second page, it's only the second page.
That's what's, I want to get rid of the one I don't.
Okay, take a second, and as I said, we just felt we would give it to you now.
What's the,
Pardon me?
what's the residential square footage? You told the other
Yes,
thing,
mhm.
but you didn't tell us
The
that.
residential, well, that's right, I didn't say that. What is the third floor square footage? 3190, Ms. Francis.
So-
It's the same as the second
This
floor.
one, but it's the second page.
The one that says site, utility, and drainage.
So same as the second floor.
This is superseded.
Okay, so everybody,
Let me ask it another way. How big is each apartment?
he's going to make a presentation,
Right.
so he'll go through all of that, and we'll address that question. We have also submitted, and not revised, a detailed landscaping plan. You'll hear from Mr. Kenny about that briefly in a minute. One of the things we're very excited about, and I guess I can be personally very excited about because I'm a neighbor to this development, having my office at 53 Sherman Street, is that it's really going to accomplish a significant enhancement of the property that I think is going to greatly benefit the area in general. And part of that enhancement is not only the architecture, which Mr. Cerrone, who I'll introduce, will walk you through, but also the landscaping improvements. We did have a code enforcement meeting on February 2nd, 2016. You have copies of that. All the comments referenced in therein have been noted in the original plans that we submitted, and those plans are consistent with the input we received at that code review session. With regard to the mixed use, the Town Plan of Conservation and Development establishes as a policy goal that, quote, additional housing opportunities should be encouraged through existing mixed-use provisions of the zoning regulations, and the application is certainly consistent with that stated policy, and we're providing additional mixed use. You've heard me talk before, I'm a great fan of mixed use in the Center District. I think it's helped create a lot of that vitality we're very proud of, and I found the best ways that we can generate that kind of opportunity is by using the mixed use, so that we put, and of course on Sherman Street, that's not unusual. Right down the street you have a very interesting and successful mixed-use development. But certainly, not only as the lawyer, but as a neighbor, I'm very, very excited to see this come to fruition, and we hope after you see the plans, you will as well. As I mentioned, Karen and Fazio are going to occupy the office portion of this property. I think that's important because it means you have a real owner, investor here, somebody who's going to maintain a strong and ongoing commitment to the property and enhance it. So, last thing before I introduce our presenters, and we'll do this briefly, I would hope, as is our custom, you have We wanted to reach out to our neighbors. Our most immediate neighbor is the Passmores, John and Carol Passmore. They were before you a couple of years ago. If you see my office and you're standing in the street, the building immediately to the left is the beautiful, I think, work that the Passmores did. You were good enough to approve that renovation and mixed use, and if you've been by or you want to knock on the door, it's really beautiful what they did. We wanted to make sure, them having made the investment in the neighborhood that they did, that they were extremely comfortable with what we did. So there's two agreements here with the Passmores that I wanted to share and make part of the record, and you can incorporate it as you see fit in your right with your decision. So, okay. The second one, okay, if you go to the second one first, is very technical in nature. Okay? And it provides, as you know, in the zoning regulations, and specifically Section 12.7.6.2, you provide that in this zone, abutting property owners can agree in writing to reduce the setback from the common property line of the adjoining properties to a minimum of 10 feet between adjacent structures. And then you require that that document be recorded on the land records. I've given you a copy of the agreement that's subject to your approval of this application. We would record on the land records. The reason that we did this, and it was something very much that the Passmores wanted to do, is if you read it, and I won't go into it in great detail, but it came up at the code review meeting, the strange wording of the setback regulations would otherwise have required us to put our building on the property line of the Passmores, the zero lot line. That's what it says. And maybe that's why your predecessors adopted this section and said, well, if you want, we can agree that it can be moved 5 feet off. So the first agreement that we have is very technical, but it will make compliant the site plan that you have, because Section 12.7.6.2 allows for this. And it's also done at the specific request of the Passmores so that the building can be set off of their property. Okay?
Yeah, so this is referenced on page 5 of the code enforcement, item number 3 under TPZ. The indication there is that 0 to 10 would be required, subject to the zone regulation.
0 on one side, I don't have it in front of me, but I think it,
Is it 0 on one
Mr. Wendt
side?
can speak to that, but I think it's...
Is it necessary? I mean, I honestly didn't look at it before,
It is, as I think, we went over this with staff, but for the agreement that the Passmores and us both wanted to make, go ahead, Jim, and we'd have to place the building on their property line, which neither of us want.
Yeah, Jim Wendt, for the record. The side yard setback regulation in the commercial zone requires either 0 or 10 feet. But owners can have a mutual agreement so that the buildings maintain a minimum of 10 feet between them. The idea there is that adjacent buildings are either going to butt up against each other, or there'll be at least 10 feet between them. So that's why
Right.
it is a little quirky language, but the intent
No, no.
is that we
That
don't
makes
have
sense.
alleyways less than 10 feet in width.
Right, now, that makes sense, especially in a design commercial district where you've got streetscape buildings up against each other with a sidewalk in front and street parking, et cetera. Or minimum of 10 feet so that there is an alleyway.
Correct.
Okay, here, it's in more of a residential area such
Correct.
that a 5-foot setback you're arguing is appropriate.
And it was much preferred by the Passmores and us to otherwise have the building on their property line.
Well, you could have put it 10 feet off.
Right, and moved it, but then I had the problem on the other side. So it just, they're very happy with this. And the first agreement, which is the technical one, allows us to take advantage of that provision of the regs, and of course, we'd record it on the land records if you approve the application. The second agreement, which was very, very neighborly and non-contentious, basically has 5 provisions, which I'll call to your attention. You can review them. Roman numeral 3B we're simply saying to them that the landscaping plan that you have, which they had a substantial hand in helping us design, will be the landscaping plan that we implement. So I think that's sort of self-evident, but, you know, it's in our agreement with them.
Yep. That's a screening within the 5 feet
Yes.
that you've agreed
And all
to
that's, on the
property.
plan you have.
Yep.
And I referenced the plan, Bill Hurley's plan, I'm only kidding.
Right.
Bill Kenny's plan. The second is Roman numeral C. You'll see that they asked for some very reasonable limitation on construction activities, and we agreed to that. The third, which is in D, is they asked that when we're doing our construction, would we install a concrete apron adjacent to their driveway? We said we would do that at our costs. And E simply recites the agreement that I've already talked to you about. And F, it makes clear and what is self-evident in the application, that we make no request as part of this application for any food service establishments of any kind, which of course would be a different use category and would have to come back to you anyway. But we're just making clear that we're not asking for that because that was important to them. So that's the Passmore agreement, and I wanted to make that all part of the record, so it was all on the record. Okay, so quickly, or not to present to you a good sound overview, but do it judiciously with our time. First, I'd like to call on Phil Cerrone. He'll walk you through, he's our architect, I think you know him well. He'll walk you through our existing conditions, the proposed site plan, and of course the architectural elevations, the materials that we're going to be using, and an overview of our interior floor plan, so we can address all your questions, including Ms. Francis's, as far as the size of those residential units. Phil.
Thank you, John. For the record, my name is Philip Cerrone. I'm an architect here in Fairfield. Before I start, I'm just going to hand out a copy of this rendering that's going to be part of my presentation. As John said, this is the existing conditions survey map. So you can see there's actually 3 structures there currently. This is 23, this is 33, and then there's a garage at the back of 33 that's close to about 5 feet off the property line currently. The existing house here is actually only about 8.5 feet off of the property line. So just as a note, our new structure is going to be 14 feet back. So our new structure is going to be further back than the existing house is. And in addition to that, the square footage of these 2 houses without the garage even is actually about 300 square feet bigger than our first floor, the first floor of those 3 houses, although our second floor is a little bit larger than that. And just to kind of orient you, this is Sherman Street here, and then Reef Road is down here. Just to kind of give you a quick overview of the site itself, this is the drainage plan that's been revised, and one of the things that was added too is a sidewalk that Bill wanted to go through the driveway here, and we've added that onto this. Most all of the drainage on site is going to be underground drainage. There is a small rain garden in the front over here, and then Bill Kenny will go over the landscaping, but this is the 5-foot separation between our property and the Passmores that'll be landscaped, as well as in the back over here. I'm sorry, one more thing on the site is in the back here is where the dumpster area is going to be, which will be enclosed, and if there's a detail on there or not. Just to walk you through the plan itself. So the building is towards the west side of the property, and there's 18 parking spaces on site. Some of the parking spaces, these spaces over here, are actually underneath part of the second floor. The first floor, as John said, is 1,997 square feet. Second floor is 3,190, which is all office space, which is the plan on the far left corner over there. There is also a full basement in the building, which is the plan on the top corner here, which is also 1,997 square feet. Building is served by an elevator that'll serve all 4 floors, include the basement plus the 3 floors. In answer to your question on the apartments, that floor is 3,190 square feet. You take the stairs out, you have approximately 1,400 square feet of each of the 2 apartments. There's 2 apartments on the 3rd floor. The plan on the left is the apartment plan, so you can see the 2 different apartments there. And then the roof plan is actually 2 roof decks for the 2 apartments, as well as some mechanical space upstairs. And then there's a stair from each one of the 2 apartments that accesses to have access up to the 3rd floor. The center part where the decks is obviously flat, and then there's a mansard roof that goes around the building. The building itself, probably the easiest way to look at it is this rendering. So the rendering that you have in front of you, and that's in front of you here, is a shot taken from the west side of the street looking towards Reef Road. This is actually the Passmore's building here. We photoshopped it in, so it's pretty accurate.
Yeah, is that like an actual photograph of the house?
This is an actual photograph, and we just put our rendering into the photograph.
Okay.
So it's accurate.
Is it accurate, you think, in terms of the distance between the 2 buildings?
Well, the distance between the buildings, so we have 5 feet on our property line. I mean, because of the angle, you can't really see the distance exactly, but it is accurate, yes. There's a driveway, so they have a driveway and then 5 feet. So there's probably less than 20 feet from our building to their building. So,
Because their building is not on the property line. So we got 5 on the property line for the applicant, but then they have 15 from
Right.
from the property line to their building.
yeah, their building is towards where Mr. Fallon's building is.
Right. And in between there is a driveway which provides for entry to the back of the Passmore's building.
Yeah, the back of the Passmore's property, there's actually a structure back there that thinks a little studio and a garage. So that's their driveway and their parking back there, so that is their access, their vehicular access there. So it's approximately 15 feet off the property line, so.
Okay, another question?
Yeah, just one, and Mr. Stern, are you going to talk about the parking, or is that already covered?
Mike.
Is that already covered by Mr. Fallon?
I'm happy to answer any questions specifically about it if you would like me to.
I didn't know if anybody else was going to.
Nobody else is going to. Well, I mean, we have a traffic expert here, so he's going to talk about traffic if that's
I just
the
got to look
question.
at it more closely, because just, you know, in terms of the spaces, Mr. Fallon said there was 18, and there was like looking to reduce it by 2 for the residential unit. And just visual, you know, when I read the word, it seemed okay, and I look at the massing of the building here, as it looks pretty big, I said, wow, really only 18 spaces for that? But,
Well, it's 18 spaces. I mean, 18 spaces meets the regulation. The 2 spaces that we're asking for the waiver would be in addition to the 18. We're not asking to reduce 18 to 16.
Right.
And the calculations for the parking are down here. We do meet the regulation for all the parking requirements.
Just to reiterate that, the parking's totally
Yeah,
compliant.
use your mic. Use your
Sorry.
mic.
The parking's totally compliant with the requirements relative to retail space, based upon the square footage, and office space. The only thing we're asking you to do is to do what you give yourself the authority to do if you choose to, which is in a mixed-use situation, in my experience, especially when you're dealing with a very limited number of mixed-use properties, that you can waive by 50% the requirement based upon the theory that I stated before. That they're likely to be there at times when the retail and office tenants are not. And you generally have done that, but not always. Because in some experiences, I think you found that the number of residential units were such that you were worried about doing that. Here we are.
okay.
And the proposal, just to be clear, the proposal includes that reduction.
Correct.
Right. So without the reduction, you would need 20.
Correct.
But we have 18 provided here.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Right, that's correct. That's 17 plus 1 handicap space. So that brings us to the total of 18. As far as the building itself goes and the aesthetics, and we did go through the regulations and the architectural design standards that are in the regulations, and some of the things that that we specifically picked off of there and that we think help conform with those regulations, and I should have noted it on the site plan, but we do have a bike rack, which is required now in your regulations, so we do have a bike rack back here on the site. The site lighting, which there's a photometric plan in your, that we submitted as part of the package. I realized, as I was putting this presentation together, we didn't note, I don't believe on that, the height of the poles, but the poles will not exceed 12 feet, which is also in your regulation. All the lights that we'll be putting on site are night sky compliant, so we think we meet all of those regulations.
So I have a question about that lighting. So one of the comments in the code enforcement from police was need adequate lighting. I'm wondering if they reviewed this lighting plan, or was that some other plan that they reviewed?
I don't think that we had the photometric plan for them at the hearing.
Okay. No, so that answers my question. So they didn't have a full lighting plan to review, and this is now part of the record.
That's correct, and I would also say to you that the light levels that we have are actually a little bit higher than the light levels that are recommended in your regulations on site. We obviously are keeping our light on site as is required with very little bleed off of the site. So we're happy to let them review this and see what their comments are on it. So,
Okay.
all right.
Question, Commissioner Francis.
Did I hear you say that it will have a metal roof? Or did I read there's a metal roof?
Yeah, so I was just going to go through some of the materials on the building, which is in conformance with the standards and the regulations. The building is a brick building with casement windows on the second and third floor. The first floor is mostly storefront, and one of the things in your design standards, in a mixed-use building in particular, is encouraging us, or the designer, to put as much glass on the first floor as you can to encourage pedestrian activity along the site, and that's the way the building's designed. So the first floor is mostly storefront glass, at least on the street and the parking lot side. The side that faces the Passmores doesn't have as much glass as you get further down, but does around the corner. So as I said, the building is basically brick. We wanted to keep that commercial look of the building, and there is a metal standing seam roof, as you can see along the top of the building. So the roofing material itself is a metal standing seam, and then the trim is basically painted trim on the rest of the building. The building itself is a three-story building. We tried to keep it as in scale with kind of the overall street as we could. As you know, across the street is a brick parking garage. There's a lot of wood buildings on the street. Down the street is a 5-story brick building. The regulation allows us to go to 5 stories, 50 feet. We're at about 42 feet and 3 stories. We are a little bit further back from the street than the 10 feet, and that's partially because of the way the regulation is written and the height of the building, so we're 14 feet back. So we're, as I said earlier, we're further back from the street than the other buildings were. We're also slightly further back from the street than Passmore's building is, and we used to be Oceana, which is now Toto's, which is the project on the other side of us, is much closer to the street than we are. So we feel that architecturally, we've done everything we could to make this conform with the neighborhood and the area that we're in.
Well, my question is, why did you choose, it's a very attractive building
Thank you.
in Willset. Why did you choose a metal roof rather than shingle, which everything else on the street has?
I don't think, well, everything else on the street that you think, that you're looking at, like the building next door, is more of a residential style building. This is more of a commercial style building. I don't think, in my opinion, that the asphalt shingle roof works as well on here as the metal roof does. The other thing I just want to point out is our equipment is going to be on the roof, and with the mansard roof and the little bit of a gable that we have, we are able to conceal all of that equipment without any additional screening, and we'll make sure that the mansard does conceal all that equipment. So that kind of summarizes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and then we'll turn over to the other consultants.
Commissioner Corcoran.
I'm just curious, the first floor footprint is smaller. Is that for a zoning reason? Is it for parking or for coverage?
It's for parking reasons, because in order for us to fit the parking on the site, we needed to keep the footprint a little bit smaller. Candidly, my clients would have loved to have had more square footage on the first floor if we could get it, but as we looked at a lot of different designs and we looked at the building closer to the other side of the property, we needed to keep the first floor somewhat smaller to be able to get the parking that we needed on the site.
And then in the back, it's just a patio, a covered patio kind of?
This back area here, yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Barrett.
Yeah, Mr. Russo, I just wonder how,
I'll tell you one then.
again, I'm just wondering how the construction's going to work in terms of, construction vehicles. Where are they going to go? I'm familiar with the street. I drive down it a lot, although I didn't look up and see the Passmore's house, how beautiful it is.
Right.
But I know where Mr. Fallon's office is.
Sure,
So- So where are the construction vehicles going to go? I mean, if you're putting equipment on the roof, something's going to have to lift that up onto the roof and,
Right, so it's going to be, there's no question, there's going to have to be a lot of good scheduling to do this project. We do have this whole parking area, so the way the site's going to have to be done is, whereas we maybe would have loved to come in and be able to excavate everything, including drainage at once, we're going to have to excavate our building while we stage the other part of the site, and probably get most of the building up and at least structurally up, and then do our site work on the other half over there, and we'll probably have to work our way out of the site then. We're well aware of the fact that we have a street that we can't really impede, so we're going to, and even during demolition, we are going to be very careful to make sure we keep everybody on our site.
The other thing I want to mention in that regard is, I know Mr. Fazio met in the last day or two, maybe even today, with the Shaughnessy's who are here tonight, and, in the spirit of this special street of which I'm a part, he expects to them that, we'll work with them so that if they, for example, we'll have good Cheryl and I talk about one thing or another 3 times a week. So if they have a funeral or something like that, during those sensitive construction periods, we'll make sure that we are coordinated with them so that any special needs they would have on, say, a day they're having a procession or something, we'll accommodate. But we've started that dialogue now.
thank you.
Any other questions?
Any other questions for Mr. Sarom?
Okay.
No?
Bill Kenny is going to speak to landscaping next.
Great. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I am not Bill Hurley. Bill Kenny. I'm going to keep this short. I'm a principal William Kenny Associates here in Fairfield, landscape architect and ecologist. We put together this landscape plan. There's 3 primary types of planting that you see on the plan. We have perimeter screening on the western side. We have an evergreen tree hedge that's in that 5-foot width area and that'll be sheared to be narrow enough to allow access between the building and the hedge, but still provide a nice dense evergreen screening there. Along the southern and eastern property boundaries, we have a 6-foot fence along the southern boundary and another fence on the eastern boundary, and then on that fence we're proposing some vines to grow on it, the climbing hydrangea that has a beautiful abundant flower in the summer. And then so we have the perimeter plantings, and then we have a streetscape planting with 4 red maples growing along the streetscape, with also some ground cover below them, and then a strip of lawn along the edge of the street. And lastly, we have, I'll put in quotes, a rear yard planting where we have a shade tree in the rear yard and a small lawn area that abuts the patio that was described earlier. And I'll say that in accordance with Section 28, we are providing more than the 1 tree per 10 spaces. We have a total of 6 trees. There's 18 spaces. Even if we have 4 street trees, if you take the 2 in the back for the, we're well above that 1 for 10 spaces.
I will say that, though, that formula is not for the sum total of trees on the site. That formula is for trees, shade trees in the parking lot. And it's funny that you just mentioned that, because as I'm looking at this, I'm thinking to myself, no trees in the parking lot. And here you are telling me we've got 6. Any reason why we didn't put a shade tree in the, in a median in the center of the parking lot or something like that? Just looks like a big piece of blacktop, honestly.
has to do with the arrangement of the property and the building, but relative to, say, a much larger parking lot for, say, Stop and Shop or something like that, when you look at the amount of asphalt, the number of spaces before you have a tree, I think that this is consistent with that.
Okay.
Well, basically, percentage-wise, we have 0. I mean, we don't have one island anywhere in that parking lot. You can't count the really 2 that are in the front of the building because they're not even part of the parking lot. Sorry, Jerry.
I mean, I think you could say that there are possibly 3.
3,
Right.
maybe 4.
On the,
Or 3.
in the corners, right?
Yeah.
On each side of the entrance and the one in the corner. Do you have a comment?
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
Commissioner Barron?
Yeah, Mr. Hill, I'm not trying to help you out here, but just given the trees that you're planning to plant in the canopy, would any of these trees be providing shade to any of the parking spaces in the lot?
With these trees are on the north side, so they're going to be shading the street. The tree in this corner here will be providing some shade in that area. We could move this tree closer to the parking, certainly, and provide some shading there.
So that's a shady space in the corner, you're saying, right over in that corner right there? The top left-hand corner?
So one option would be where we have the handicap spot right here. So we need to have 24 feet between the have a car back up to the property line. We would have to get engineering, because one of those comments today was that you wanted to make sure we had 24 feet here.
Right, because that's an aisle,
With
right?
us reducing the 24 feet here behind what's basically the walk area for the handicap, then we could potentially put a tree there.
You want to take out the handicap walkway?
No, it would have to be right after it, so it'd be right in this area right there. So be able to plan out. It would be right here.
Oh, I see, but then you would be taking away the 24 feet behind there.
Well, at that point, so if you did it, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
If you did it like that, you wouldn't have the 24 feet here as a drive-through, so we'd have to get engineering to say it's okay to do that.
Yeah. So, before we leave this topic, one area that the tree warden commented on was in the area that is marked in the public right-of-way. I would like to see 4 ornamental shade trees on the right and 3 on the left-hand side of the driveway, no less than 3.5 inches in diameter. Is that part of the plan?
That is not, and frankly, we have these, I just don't think there's the room for, I'm not sure if that was a mistake in his notes, but when you think of it, typically shade trees 30, 40 feet on center, and we have these, they're about 30 feet on center, so I wouldn't want those any closer than what they're shown.
Just let me say too, I have great confidence in the diligence and the practicality and the reasonableness of the tree warden.
I agree.
And I really do. And I'd be very happy to have him take a look at this or have staff have him take a look at this and he give you his comments because I think that's terrific. And I think he was making comments not about a landscaping plan.
Oh, he didn't have this?
No, not at the time. So I think he would probably, if he reviewed this with Kenny, think that it meets the intent of his comment in terms of the streetscape. And also, I would think he would agree with Mr. Kenny that as a practical matter, it's the red, but I fully expect you might want him to take a look at it.
Yeah, okay. Well, maybe one of the things that we can do is have the tree warden take a look at the plan in light of his comments and also in light of the regulations regarding shade trees in the parking lot and, just give us a recommendation.
Right,
I mean,
yeah, and my only comment
I'm not
on
trying
that-
to give you a hard time.
No, I know you're not. And my only comment on that, and this is me, and you may or may not agree, but I think that the street tree, the parking lot tree regulation was designed to ensure that in larger commercial centers, we didn't have these seas of asphalt, as we saw pre-zoning, that were just ugly, okay? When you translate that intent to a smaller site like this in the center district where you have a total of 18 parking spaces, I would hope the commission would feel comfortable saying, we're better off using our planting dollars to enhance the streetscape, to provide buffering, et cetera, from the neighbors. But I fully agree that let the tree warden take a look at it. But I think he'll be very happy with at least what we've tried to do in the front of
Yeah,
the building.
okay. Commissioner Barrett?
Yeah, I just, not to be argumentative, but, and again, all the spots do not need to be shaded. The letter of our regulations would require two, in this case. Two, we consider shade trees for the parking lot. And that's why I asked, do any of them provide shade? And I think maybe one does. And, I mean, that's what, really not theoretic, but literally our regulations dictate.
Well, we're not at all opposed to pursuing Mr. Sarone's idea with Mr. Hurley. And although, again, I cannot speak for Mr. Hurley, I think the intent of protecting that 24-foot aisle width would not be, impeded by putting a tree where he suggests. So, that's another thing that we can look at.
Yeah, I mean, this is.
And then you'd have your two, then you'd have your two.
Yeah, and that's just what it is, and I know the intent was the seas of asphalt, but it applies here too in this district as well, so I just hope we could find some way to meet the literal regulation, and I fully recognize, the street landscaping might serve, the town better in terms of, spending your landscaping, resources, but,
I mean, if it fits, if the chair and the rest of the commission thinks it's a good idea, obviously, hopefully the hearing closes tonight, but that's not to say I and Mr. Wendt can't explore with Mr. Hurley the concept that Mr. Sarone raised, and if that way you could know in your work session that the engineer is comfortable with that, because we certainly are if he is. Okay.
May I ask a question about the chain link fence? Is there some reason it's not white vinyl? What's behind this property?
The fence that's along the police property is your fence, that's the town fence. And then the fence on the other side is Toto's fence. None of those fences are we proposing. They're all existing fences.
I didn't think you would do a chain link fence.
I would not do a chain link fence.
I have a couple questions.
Yep. Commissioner Corcoran?
On the landscape. First of all, on the map that's up there now, are there some posts in between those parking spaces under the overhang?
Yes, Mr. Sarone, you want to address that? That's Bill's comment.
Yeah, there is 3 columns where the second floor is. So 2 of those columns are between 2 of the parking spaces. This was actually one of Bill Hurley's comments, was he questioned just were they going to get damaged? We've done this many times. There'll be, 12-inch diameter steel tube columns, and so they'll be set right in between the 2 parking spaces, and I believe they'll be fine there.
So, and those parking spaces are regulation width or a little wider?
Those parking spaces are 9 feet wide. So at that one spot, they'll be just slightly narrower, but that's just in that one spot, right? I mean, if need be, we have a little room to play and we can get them a little bit wider.
You need more room to swing in then and to get out to avoid hitting.
Yeah, there's, in the one space, because there's one space that's between the 2 columns. So we can widen that one space another 6 inches, and then it'll be 9 feet.
Gotcha. So there's just one row.
That you
of
have to drive
columns.
between them. There's 2
There's 2 columns in one row in between 2 spaces.
That's correct. So you can see it best on my plan, actually. So there's 1 column here, which is actually on the sidewalk, and then there is 2 columns here.
Oh, there is.
So these 2 parking spaces here, you do have to drive between those 2 columns. This one here, though, you don't drive between it, really. That's on the sidewalk. So it's really only that one spot that you drive in between the 2 columns. And they're 9 feet center to center, which I think still gives you adequate space to drive in here. We can move this line over a little bit and make that an extra 6 inches bigger if necessary.
Yeah.
And we have a little bit of room to play with there.
To Commissioner Corcoran's point, each of those parking spaces would require a little bit more of a swing, right? That's your point, is each one has that column at the end of the space, so you can't kind of crank your wheel around.
Not a situation that's similar to what you confront in the major parking garage right across the street.
Oh, true.
Well, I've been in that parking garage. I think they're probably closer than those columns are, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, another question. In that agreement we saw at the beginning, it talked about an apron for the Passmores. And where is that driveway that the apron goes to?
Right, so that driveway is Passmore's driveway, which is right here. So where you see on my drawing, on my A100 drawing, where you see the curb cut on the bottom, that's the beginning of his driveway there.
So you're putting in that apron on his property?
Yeah, apparently when they did their project, they just haven't put the apron in yet, and they knew we were doing this project. They've asked our clients if they would, as a courtesy, put that apron in just when we do all our concrete sidewalks and aprons across the front, because we will be doing a new concrete sidewalk across the front, and my clients have agreed to put that apron in for them.
I mean, to be
a town
fair,
requirement.
that was a consideration for the deal. I mean, you negotiated an agreement with your
Yeah.
neighbors in order to get what you wanted, and you gave them something they wanted.
Yeah, well, but in fairness to the Passmores, who are good friends and clients of mine, it didn't come across that way.
No, I
And you know
understand.
John Passmore, it wasn't like, well, you do this. It was just a sort of an afterthought. He said, would you guys, since you're doing this in his English accent, would it ever be possible? And we said, sure. So it was never a quid pro quo.
The English have a funny way of negotiating.
Well, they're learning, aren't they?
And it's wonderful that you think it was so kind.
So one more.
Go ahead.
So when we were talking at the beginning about the setback from the sideline, and we were talking about it could be either 0 or 10 feet.
Correct.
Compromise at 5, but I was expecting to see the Passmore's building 5 feet from the line, but it's not. It's already back.
It's already back 15 feet, and I think that's one of the things that made them feel very comfortable, because their driveway's on that side, they're never going to be building outside. And I actually met with John and him, and John Passmore a couple of times, and really, he was 100% fine. He did have a lot of input to what we did for landscaping and screening across on the side there, but his driveway is almost on the property line. Maybe it's 4 feet off of it, something like that. So I'm guessing he's 15 feet away. So we probably have 20 feet. The agreement states that nobody can build within 5 feet of either side, basically.
Right.
Thanks.
Okay, great. Anybody? Commissioner McAleese.
While you're there, could you maybe just indicate on that drawing what you were talking about before on the table, that where you might put the tree, just so we
Right,
can-
so if you can see where this car is here, this is the handicap parking spot. So this is the striped area next to the handicap parking spot. What I'm saying is at the end of that right here, if we
Okay.
could put a tree right there. So the reason for the 24 feet is so you have 24 feet when you back out. But really, it's also so you have two-way traffic here, you have the 24. So we would need engineering to say, okay, if we want to put that tree there.
And-
Especially being it was one of his comments.
And especially considering that you got 2 more parking spaces at the very
That's
end there. I mean,
correct.
those cars aren't just doing K-turns and pulling out. You might actually have other cars
Right.
that are coming and going.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and we did, on the revised, on one of his comments was, we didn't have that, the dimension wasn't on the site plans. It scaled off at like 23.6, but Neil did today on the plans you have revised, get 24 feet on there and make sure that it all met that regulation. So there is actually a 24-foot dimension on the plans that you should have gotten today.
Yeah. So, thank you.
If,
Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Smith? Okay, thank you.
okay, no other questions, I'm going to turn it over to Garrett, who's going to do traffic.
Yeah, we
Is that okay?
submitted a traffic access study, and you, I know in your diligence have read it. Garrett Balletta is here of Frederick B. Clark and Associates. He'll just give you a brief overview.
Good evening, Garrett Ballella, professional engineer with Clark Associates, located in Fairfield, Connecticut. I'm just going to briefly go over the traffic impact study, and if you have any questions, you can feel free to ask. Figure 1 that you see provided in the traffic impact study just kind of puts in context where the site is. You see the Fairfield train station, we have Post Road running through the center, our 2 study area roadways, Reef Road and Sherman Street, and then you can see the site almost at the corner, the southwest corner of the 2. Moving on to figure 2 provided in the traffic study, just a little bit more of a close-up of the site. You see as it exists today, there's currently 3 access points or driveways. You have an unpaved driveway on the westerly side of the site, and then a separate ingress and egress site at 23 Sherman Street. Our proposal is to take the easterly access drive and convert it to a full movement two-way access drive and remove the other two existing curb cuts and access points on Sherman Street. And that will also increase the availability of on-street parking on Sherman Street as well. Our study area focused on the intersection of Reef Road and Sherman Street. It's a two-way stop-controlled intersection. And I also want to just point out, recently, within the past year, a crosswalk was also installed on the southbound approach on Reef Road at the request of local residents and business owners to enhance the safety of that intersection. As part of our traffic analysis, we conducted recent 2015 turning movement traffic counts and pedestrian counts at the intersection of Reef Road and Sherman Street. They were done in December 2015 during the weekday morning, weekday afternoon, and Saturday midday peak periods. What I have before you are the 2015 existing volumes for the weekday afternoon. Volumes on the roadways were generally the highest during that period. And to develop our 2015 existing traffic volumes to a 2017 no-bill condition, we applied an annual growth rate of 0.5%, and there were no other developments in the area anticipated within the horizon year period to add significant traffic to these roadways. And the traffic study also includes a site traffic generation analysis for the proposed multi-use development. You'll see it's included in Table 3 in the traffic study. And the trip generation rates and estimates are based on the IT trip generation manual published by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. We took no credit for any internal capture trips between the different land uses on the site, between the retail, the office, and the residential. And we also took no credit in the analysis for any pedestrians patroning the site, bicyclists, or anyone using public transit. So you could say that the volumes would be considered very conservative. On the right side of the top table, it indicates that the proposed multi-use development will generate 9 vehicle trip ends during the weekday morning, 13 during the weekday afternoon, and is anticipated to generate a total of 12 during the Saturday midday peak hour.
Question there.
Yes.
And so 12 on a Saturday during the peak hour
Correct.
for a professional office and 2 apartments?
That's for the total, all 3 land uses on the site, the apartments, the office, and the retail. However, offices typically generate a very low volume of traffic on a Saturday condition. The retail would be the most active, and there would be a moderate number of trips.
So you had to
For
use
residential.
numbers that were applied to office/retail and not just professional offices? So you think it's more than we should expect, or about right? It just seems kind of high to me.
No, it's based.
Not that it would be, I'm not suggesting that I think it's significant or not, one way or the other.
Correct.
It just seemed like, given the building, seems like a good number of ends for 18 parking spaces. No?
It's very reasonable. All land uses were calculated separately, and like I said, the office generates very little traffic on a Saturday condition. So it's mostly just the retail land use supporting all that trip generation.
Fair enough. Thanks.
The next figure just shows the proposed site access configuration. And as I mentioned, there's just one access drive along the easterly boundary of the property, and you can see it right here. We did conduct a spot speed study at the location of the proposed access drive, and we found that the 85th percentile vehicle speed on both directions on Sherman Street was actually less than 20 miles per hour. And that's something to be expected, as there's a stop control intersection a very close distance to the east, and vehicles are slowing to stop as they come to the stop sign on Sherman Street. We located the site access drive intentionally along the easterly side of the property because it maximizes the sight lines down Sherman Street, and also still provides clear sight lines to the two-way stop control intersection.
Any questions?
Right now?
No, it's done.
Okay.
I won't go through the site traffic generation assignment in too much detail, but you'll see right here a figure of the actual assignment of the trips during the weekday afternoon peak hour. We anticipate about 50% of the site traffic will arrive from or depart to the north on post-release. And you can just see a sample of the distribution for the greatest generating period, the weekday afternoon peak hour. And moving on. Conducted a Synchro HCM 2010 capacity analysis, and what you want to look at is the right side of this table where it shows the project impacts. Our analysis indicated that there will not be any significant impacts to the two-way stop control intersection of Sherman Street, the Shermantown Green, and Reef Road, and that there'll be no changes in level of service due to the added traffic to our roadway system. The table also shows that the site access drive will have excellent levels of service during all 3 peak hours. Also included in the report is an accident analysis. We obtained accident data for the latest 3 years, which at the time of the study was from 2012 to 2014, and the table is provided right here, but it doesn't show any pattern of instances which warrants mitigation, but you can find that in the report. And lastly, at the request of the commission, this isn't a table that is included in the report, but I have 12 copies to submit for the record tonight. We've included a table which shows the site traffic generation of the site in a comparison made to the 2017 no-bill traffic volumes, and it shows that on a percentage basis increase. So I'll hand that in tonight. Does anyone have any questions?
I have questions.
Yes.
I don't know if they're directed for you or for Attorney Fallon, but can you give me a breakdown of the 18 spaces and how many you're figuring for the retail, how many you're figuring for the offices, and so on and so forth?
So, yeah.
Okay. I know I wasn't on that list, but...
You're on it now.
It's right here on the bottom corner of my drawing.
Okay.
I can just read it to you if you want.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead. Read it if you can.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
So the regulation is 1 space for the first 1,500 square feet of retail. That's 1 car for the first floor. Then the next 497 divided by 250 is 2. So that's 3 cars for the retail. Then the office on the second floor is 13.
All right, slow down, slow down. So we got 2 retail spaces with 3 parking spots?
3 retail spaces.
With,
You're talking about space, he's talking about space, parking space.
right, parking spots, 3 parking spots for the retail.
Are required by the regulations, right?
Okay, and how many retailers are we planning in the building?
No, I mean,
It's 1,900.
It's 1,900 square feet, so it could be 1 very moderately sized retailer, it could be 2 very teeny sized retailers. It's neighborhood retail.
Okay, so let's say 1 to 2 retailers.
Right.
Okay, so go ahead.
And then the offices, it's 1 for every 250, so that's 13 parking spaces for the offices.
And with Fazio, Karen and Fazio, as I said before, that's going to be more. We got 4 employees.
You have 4 employees.
And then the retails, the apartments are 2 spaces per apartment, which would be 4. We're asking for a waiver of 2 of those spaces, with the concept being that you would have those 4 spaces at night when the offices people aren't there. So that's the breakdown.
So if we have, let's say, 1 retail space, 1 retailer with 3 parking spots, approximately 1,500 square feet, 1,900 square feet?
1,997.
1,900 square feet. Where are the customers going to park?
You want to take that one?
Because on a Saturday,
Right.
if we have retail, or a Friday, or,
I'll address that.
Go ahead.
Let
you
me-
know,
The bottom line is, to answer the question as a practical matter, they're going to be able to, there's on-street parking, but also, in terms of your Saturday question, the office, they work hard, but they don't work on Saturdays, Karen and Fazio, okay? So you're going to have all those spaces there. But the point is, to regulate, subject to the 2 spaces for the residential, we do comply with your promulgated standards for parking for retail.
I understand that, but sometimes you look at things and they just don't fit, though.
I
You
think
know
this
that.
fits.
And you tell me put on my planning hat, so now I got
Well,
my planning hat
all right,
on,
well,
and I
if
see
you-
2 retailers with 2 people in each place working, plus customers coming in and out.
Yeah.
It's a possibility that I say to myself, No, it doesn't work.
If you go down the street to that other mixed use down there, there's retail tenants there, smaller retail tenants, identical parking situations, and it's fine. This is not going to be a high, based upon the nature of the space, right? This is not going to be a high-volume retailer.
But we don't know what the retailer is.
No, but you know by the nature of the space, which your own regulations take into consideration, that you're in the center design district. This is not going to be the type of retail that's going to generate a
No,
lot
but
of
you know what I
parking.
also see happening? I see people at Toto parking there,
Well, that's something we'll have to police.
you know?
We'll police that.
And then I see a lot of that taking, I'll give you a perfect example. It's totally non-related, but I know I voted against this, but the commission voted for it, was this Dunkin' Donuts parking lot on Black Rock Turnpike, and the urgent care went in there. And I said, this parking lot's a disaster to begin with, and now we're putting an urgent care center in there. We have a dry cleaner and a Dunkin' Donuts and an urgent care center, and the parking lot's a disaster. And you say to yourself, you know what, we have the amount of parking spots, but it just doesn't work.
But
So
then
now-
you should change your regulations
Yeah,
as
I
a legal
understand that. I
matter.
appreciate
Okay?
that.
And I don't mean that pejoratively, but the other thing I would say is, Jerry, that's, Commissioner, that's a whole different situation, what you just
No,
described.
I know that, but I'm just,
And as far as the first point, you're absolutely right, but we're making a substantial investment in this property, and with all due respect to our neighbor at Toto, and I'm sure they're not encouraging it, we're going to protect our
well,
parking.
they might be happy to get new clients.
But
coming
no,
to the
but we're
restaurant
going
and
to
take
be,
it.
we're going to protect our parking for our tenants and our residents.
Right.
And that's the fact of the matter, for practical reasons and also for liability reasons.
Okay.
Before I summarize, one comment I wanted to make, and this is kind of peculiar, but it may give you, we are absolutely committed, as our dialogue tonight said, to pursuing with the town engineer to see whether or not we can establish one more tree in that area, et cetera. So this is in no way meant to change the very constructive nature of the dialogue. However, when you look at section 28.11.3, it says that the parking shade tree requirements will absolutely apply to parking lots of 20 spaces or more. Now, that's an interesting situation here, too, because we're proposing 18 spaces, but you could turn around and say, yeah, but you should have 20. I get it. And then it goes on to say, if it's less than 20 spaces, you have discretion with regard to that. So I just wanted you to, as we all work towards making sure the spirit of the regulation is met, I wanted to call that to your attention. I think this is a great application. We all work on Sherman Street with consideration of the substantial pre-existing nonconformity of that beautiful center district. My office doesn't meet parking requirements as they presently exist. The funeral home doesn't meet parking requirements as they presently exist. We work as a neighborhood downtown center business district. This proposal, as should be the case with any new development, subject to the two-space waiver that you give yourself the right to do, does meet the requirements of the zoning. So I think it's very difficult for non-conforming tenants like myself and others to complain about the establishment of a parking plan that conforms with the regulation on two properties that are absolutely non-conforming as a matter of zoning law. And you all know that one of the standards of zoning is that you should eliminate nonconformities whatever you can, and that frankly provide nothing in terms of the ambiance, character, and quality and preservation of property values in the neighborhood. So I'm proud as a lawyer to be representing these individuals. I'm proud as a resident, if you will, of Sherman Street to have this kind of development going on. Mr. Andre did a great job with regard to the renovation of the building that is now his offices. There's a lot of good things going on in the downtown center, and Sherman Street is a wonderful street. And this application is going to enhance the character and the ambiance of that street. We're going to eliminate the non-conforming uses. Everything we propose is permitted under your regulations in the zone, and we comply with all the regulations subject to the request that you waive the two parking spaces as you give yourself the authority to do for mixed-use projects in the zone. So we hope you will agree that This is a good proposal, it's a compliant proposal, and it's one that's in keeping with our goal in Fairfield generally, and certainly in the center, to always keep enhancing and maintaining strong investment commitment to our downtown center, which is our centerpiece of our community. Please answer any questions you or the members of the public may have.
Thanks. I do have just a couple of cleanup questions. Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Brown? No? So I just wanted to go through, I have not admittedly looked at the revised plan from the code enforcement. Fire, number 2.
I'm just going to get my code notes out.
Please. Mr. Kessler identified 80 feet of common path of travel to get to the exit point. He said it looks like you show 80, 75 is the requirement. Was that dealt with?
It was, we believe it was. We haven't run it by Mr. Kessler yet, but we will make sure that we get his approval on it.
Okay. Is it 75 or is it 80 on the plan?
It was 80, and we've reduced it to 75.
You have?
so.
Okay, great. And then item number 3, the exit discharge, you had it into a vestibule.
Right, we've changed that.
Changed that, okay. And then the rescue compliant windows, item number 5.
Yeah, we actually have always had that on the drawing. And candidly, we're going to do it because he's asked us to do it. The building is going to be a sprinklered building. Once you have the sprinkler in there, it eliminates that requirement actually, but we're going to put it in anyway.
Makes sense. Did he know that it was sprinklered when you spoke to him?
I'm not sure.
Okay. And then the yard drains I was interested in. The yard drains managing runoff on the west side of the building.
Where's that comment?
This is engineering Laura Pooley, number 11.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to look at that, the west side of the building, which is which way is west?
There it is, number 11. On west side of building, recommend installing yard drains to manage runoff.
Yeah.
Is that on the plans, Neil? That is on the plans.
That's now on the plans?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll look for them. Great.
Mechanicals?
Pardon?
The mechanicals?
Mechanicals?
We had the roof plan, which did not include mechanicals because you got decks, right?
Well, no, we have, you can see it on the roof plan there. We have a small space. I'm sorry, it's on the other drawing. We have a small space dedicated for the mechanical equipment. So it's this space right here. You can see on the plan, the space that's white on this plan here. It's a dedicated space for mechanical equipment. It's behind the mansard roof on the outside, and then there's a screen wall on the inside. So all the equipment will be hidden from the street.
Hidden from the street?
Hmm?
What about from the parking lot?
Well, it'll be hidden from the parking too. It'll be hidden from any place on the ground.
From view, from the ground?
Yeah.
Not,
mhm.
not just
Absolutely.
the, I'm
I didn't mean
sorry.
just from the street, but it'd be hidden from the ground.
As opposed to the parking
Right,
lot, sure,
yeah.
right,
Mhm.
okay. Okay. That's all I had. Do you have any more?
I'm just saying, now they hit from the green across the street, you won't be able to see that from across the street or anything like that?
No.
Well, you won't see it if you're on the ground. If you're in the top level of the parking lot across the street, I
No, no.
still don't think you'll see it.
Not elevated, but if
What about
you,
on a line of sight view, you won't see it anywhere on the ground?
No.
if you're standing
The
on the ground.
building's 40 feet tall. I mean, there's no place on the street you're going to be able to see it from.
Right. Okay, all right. Anybody else? Very good, thanks very much. So, is there any member of the public that wishes to be heard on this? Very good. Everybody will get a chance to speak. We just ask that you keep your comments focused on the issues, and there's no time limit, but just try to be efficient.
I'll be brief, thank you.
Yep.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cheryl Shaughnessy. We are the owners of 50 Reef Road LLC, Shaughnessy Banks Funeral Home, which is directly across the street from the property at issue. We are at the corner of Sherman Street and Reef Road. To Commissioner Leslie's point, the traffic there is a nightmare. We all know our police chief himself was hurt in a car accident on Reef Road last year, and I suspect that that wasn't part of the statistics to which you alluded, but there is a concern that we have of the traffic, and we also have a concern about the parking. Toto has been wonderful since they've bought the property previously owned by Oceana, but there is a major problem on the street with parking For those of you who don't know, in front of the the Toto space, that parking is 2-hour parking. Regretfully, it's honored in the breach.
Regretfully, it's what?
It's honored in the breach. Unfortunately, people park there far too long. Mr. Fallon is correct, Attorney Fallon, my colleague, is correct. Across the street, we have our parking. I've indicated to them, we're not as averse to the parking, but what I would really consider is the waiver, because the more parking you can put on that property, the better it's going to be for the street and the better it's going to be for the traffic. The reference was made earlier about a crosswalk. We actually went to the town and asked for the 2 crosswalks to be put on Reef Road, because unfortunately, people just come tearing down Reef Road and they do not stop. Whether you're crossing the parking lot into the employee parking lot, as you all know, at the end of Sherman Street, right across, there's a town parking lot that's also used for employees. Pardon me. And I've indicated to the gentlemen, the applicants themselves, that we would certainly ask if they do go over the number of parking spaces, that they consider buying employee parking permits for their people. I'm also very concerned about the tenants, because we have 3 tenants above our property. We buy employee permits for all of them so they can park in the parking lot, because we're very concerned about the traffic flow on Sherman Street. Not only do you have cars, but you have trucks both coming down Reef Road on their way to the dump, the recycling. That's their only means of access for the most part. So again, very, very concerned about the parking. I think the building is beautiful. I think they've done a great job integrating the 2 spaces of the 2 buildings that are there now, but parking is a real issue. I've spoken also to Mr. Cerrone about possibly moving the garbage. As I look at the plans, it looks like they're in the back left corner,
Yeah.
where they back up to Toto. Toto also has its garbage back there. So I'm a little concerned with back-to-back garbage containers there. If there's a possibility they can put it farther behind their building where it would also be out of sight, we would appreciate that. But again, my big concern is the parking and the effect it's going to have on Sherman Street. Attorney Fallon and I are correct. I practice law around the corner on Rowan Street as well, so I'm very familiar with the street. And when it does get crowded, I would really question the 12 people coming and going. That's a really busy time of day on Saturday, because people not only are parking, and they may expect 12 people in and out of their building, but as you're coming down Sherman Street on a Saturday, that's a major, major causeway for traffic downtown on a Saturday. As well during the week. As many of you know, you have the concerts across the street in the green. You've got the parents coming down with their children as well in the green, which we love having on Sherman Green. But all that causes traffic. And so one of the things I think we have to be really cognizant about is the parking and what happens. We're blessed because farther up here we have the dentist and the law offices, so it's a little bit less congested farther up. People regretfully do use Mr. Kleban's garage, I'm sure, when they're not entitled to do so, but that's not an excuse to abrogate anything. So again, our concern would be anything you can do to maximize the parking on their property would be appreciated. But I think we're naive to think that it's not going to be a bit of a traffic congestion in that area. Again, Commissioner Alessi, I heard you speak about Toto and the parking there. They do have a lot on the other side of their property. They also have commercial tenants upstairs who rent from them, and I think the owner of the building actually is on site as well. So they do have parking in their own lot, and they do use the parking lot across the street as well, both for their employees now that they're under new ownership. But again, the more you can maximize the parking on that spot, I would please encourage the commission to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Anyone else? Please.
I'm part of the Shaughnessy plan. I only have one question.
Thanks very much. Just state your name.
My name is Helen Milson, and I'm part of the Shaughnessy clan. I have an apartment right across the street from where this building is going to be. We have on the street, and I have an apartment on the 2nd floor. The architect next door has an apartment on the 2nd floor, and the building that is right next to, I don't know the name, the beautiful house right next door to where the building is going to be has an apartment on the 2nd and 3rd floor. The only thing I'm concerned about is the store. Is it going to be, is it going to be a 7-day store? Is it going to be lighted up at night so that the apartments on the second floor, on those 3 buildings that I talk about, they have a bedroom that faces Sherman Street, and they will be facing, what kind of a store is it going to be? That's the only thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to be heard? No? Okay. Mr. Fallon?
Thank you, I'll be brief. We actually don't know, as I said before, we're going to have, it'll be a retail store. And I know that's broad, but, you know, I can't mislead the commission beyond this. Let me address Cheryl's comments, and maybe in a positive way. First of all, the dumpster location. We chose that dumpster location very carefully because it was out of sight, and it is immediately adjacent to a dumpster. We thought that was a pretty good idea, rather than putting a dumpster off of somebody's house. So we think the dumpster's in the right location, particularly because it backs the Toto dumpster. I don't agree with all of Cheryl's comments. I'm down there. I'm there every day, and I have been for 20 years. I think that the parking is sufficient down there. I haven't noted a parking problem, even on days and times when, you know, there is a funeral or there's something going on at the Green. It works. However, we are, you know, asking you for that 2-space waiver, which you give yourself the authority to do. I think Ms. Shaughnessy may have come up with a great solution. In the spirit of working with the commission and with our neighbors, Mr. Fazio and Mr. Herbst, they'll commit to signing up for 2 employee spaces for their employees, without regard to the fact that we employ 4 people and all that stuff. So that way, I think the commission, I can say to Ms. Shaughnessy, and the commission can say to Ms. Shaughnessy, and I can say to you, we now ask you to grant us that waiver, but we understand the sensitivities that people have, and therefore we will compensate for those 2 spaces by contracting for 2 employee spaces, which are, you know, very convenient, really, because they're over, you all know where they are, they're over on the parking lot in Sherman Green. So I do firmly believe that that will work. And I also do believe that in terms of Mr. Alessi's concerns, which I always value, I really do believe that if that's that Saturday retail time, the beauty here is no matter who the office use is, it's probably not going to be very active, and that constitutes the lion's share of the building, actually. And in the case of Karen and Fazio, as I said, they have 4 employees, and it is not a weekend-oriented business. So hopefully with those factors addressed, you might consider favorably this application, which, as I said, without being redundant, I think is a really good application for the town as a whole, the center district, and for our street. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. With that, I will close the public hearing on this item. Next item. I don't know. Okay. Have a good night. Next item is 256 Spruce Street, application of Michael Shinella, trustee, to amend the zoning map to establish a design commercial district on land presently zoned Residence B. And I'll call the third item as well, 256 Spruce Street, compliance application of Michael Shinella, trustee, for expanded off-street parking. And if for some reason the applicant is not going to submit these together.
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
It's okay.
But yes, I think we should
Makes sense.
agree that we'll have a single hearing for both these applications. They'll constitute the record for both.
Very good.
Both
We
hearings.
don't need to vote on that, do we? Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, good evening. For the record, I'm John Fallon. I'm an attorney here in Fairfield. I do represent Michael Shinella, who's here tonight as well. If the chair thinks it's appropriate, I'm going to ask something that you can tell me whether it's okay, but we have a lot of people, or a number of people here from Spruce Street, some people who are tenants, and They've come out tonight, taking times away from their family and what have you. I don't know that I couldn't run through this quickly, but I'm wondering whether the chair would entertain the thought that maybe these folks who've been here so they don't have to come back, I'd defer my comments till they spoke first. I don't know how you feel about that.
I personally don't think that's a good idea, in part because...
You won't know what they're talking about.
And I don't know that they would be fully informed to make their comments. I understand the point, but my immediate reaction is that I don't think it's a very good idea. Does anybody have any?
No, I'm sort of like calling Hurley Kenny, you know, I'm not doing well, but
No.
I'm second guessing myself. So
I appreciate it.
Let me start. As I said, I'm representing Mike Shingle, who's here tonight. He's the owner as trustee of the property that's located at 256 Spruce Street. With me tonight, in addition to Mike, is Mike Bertula from the Huntington Company, and Mike Casado, who is our architect, although there's nothing to be built here, but he did make an analysis that I think is pertinent to your consideration. You've seen this parcel before, and we'll talk about that and the history. But it is a 7,038 square foot parcel. It's presently zoned Residence B, and it abuts property zoned Design Commercial located at 3355 and 3377 Post Road. The 3355 Post Road building houses Dunkin' Donuts and Subway sandwich shops, and the 3377 Post Road building has the Lucky Thai Kitchen, which has just signed a lease, and it is certainly one of the many compelling reasons that we seek your consideration of this application, as I'll discuss further. Vision Center, Toscano Italian Restaurant, and Blow Dry Hair Salon. The purpose of this application is to ask you to change the zone of the subject parcel to Design Commercial, and to incorporate approximately, then what we would do if you did that would be incorporate approximately 1/2 of the land area of 256 Spruce Street into the adjacent property located at 3377 Post Road, with the remaining 1/2 of the land being added to the property at 3355 Post Road. Why do we want to do that? Well, that's the reason for the certificate of zoning compliance application. It is our intention, subject to your approval, to improve the subject parcel with 18 parking spaces to be used on a shared basis in conjunction with the adjacent commercial and retail uses at 3355 and 3377 Post Road. As was the case in 2014, when this application came before you, these shopping centers that I've talked about are really in dire need of additional on-site parking. I don't have to tell you that sufficient and convenient parking is essential for any retail operation to be successful. We were all sad to see Be Fresh on the Post Road suffer a demise within 6 months. And when you talk to most people, they found that to be because the parking was inconvenient and or insufficient.
On what basis?
I'm sorry?
I went there. It was the winter time. There was nobody in the parking lot. I literally parked in front of the front door.
I'm only telling you what I've been told, so.
And what's that worth?
Well, I guess in your case, not much, in this case.
They didn't even wait till the nice weather to see whether the thing worked.
I didn't represent them. I'm just telling you to make a point, perhaps a badly chosen example of something we can all agree on, if not Be Fresh, and that is that sufficient and convenient parking is really essential. It's the lifeblood for businesses. And we'll send that letter to Be Fresh tomorrow.
Forgive my reaction.
No, I'm sorry.
I was really disappointed when I heard that they closed
I like
that.
the place.
I mean, they didn't even give it a chance.
I know.
And it was in the middle of town,
Yeah.
designed for walking. It's sad.
Plan B Burger, right out in front with all of the activity. I get
There you go. Sorry,
Okay.
sorry I overreacted to that one.
So, getting back to the concern that And this really is about the concern that the owners of the two centers have for their tenants. The centers are presently non-conforming as to their parking requirements. The minimum number of parking spaces that are required based upon the present uses in their square footage is 58 spaces. We only have 53. You've received, or I'm going to give you momentarily, numerous letters from our tenants asking you to grant this zone change so that the additional parking that we're asking for can be used to their benefit. There's no other purpose here than to deal with this ongoing tenant need. And over the last 2 years, since this application was before you the last time, that tenant need has not in any way dwindled, and in fact, has been exacerbated. But there's another constituency here that I think also directly benefits from the granting of this application. And that is the residents of Spruce Street. Because as a result of the fact that these centers are underparked, we have a situation where employees and customers shopping in the centers are parking on Spruce Street because of the insufficiency of on-site parking. And I have some photographs that I'm going to make part of the record. I decided not to burden you all with individual ones. So these are 3 separate shots of, taken about a week ago, of Spruce Street, you can pass them around, immediately adjacent to the properties that we're talking about. And again, they state the obvious if you look at them. That because the parking is undersuited in the centers, we have this issue. So what drives this application by Mr. Shingle is 2 things. The interests of his tenants, because he wants them to be successful, as we all would, and the interests of the neighbors of Spruce Street, many of whom are here tonight to speak on their own behalf. So the granting of the zone change and the compliance application is going to allow us to eliminate this existing condition with regard to parking on Spruce Street. And that's going to benefit the interests of public safety and the folks who live in that street. We're also going to, go ahead.
No, I'll wait till you.
Yeah, we're also going to ensure, by way, as I'll talk about in a minute, in the compliance application, that we've totally shut off Spruce Street as an ingress or egress from either of these centers, and I'll go through that in a minute.
Excellent. You mentioned, as you mentioned, we heard this once before. Is there any-
2014.
Right. And not by way of judging one way or the other at the moment, is there anything different in this application?
No, and I'll address that.
Okay.
Because it gets to the old thing
I just
here.
needed to understand it, because we're going to go through it all over again. Is there anything different?
You know, it gets to that old standard that Mr. Devanchek so eloquently quotes to you when you're dealing with zone change. Time, experience, etc. And the case I am going to make, and I hope you'll agree, is that the time and experience are such that a reconsideration, because that's really what this is warranted. And I think it's important to point out, as long as we're on that topic, Mr. Shingle, when this was denied in 2014, was disappointed. But he didn't appeal it. He considered the commission's decision. He tried to work with it, tried to work with his tenants, tried to work with Spruce Street, but yes, now he's back. But he's back, I think, in a very respectful way. And he's back after, you know, not contesting your decision, not forcing the town to court. He recognizes your discretion in making these decisions. But he's hoping now you'll look at it in terms of some of these facts I hope we'll present and say, we can make another decision here.
Fair enough, thank you.
Okay. The plan of conservation and development, you know, there's 2 things under the law that you have 2 standards when you act in the capacity of a planning commission and change a zone or not. One is that you have to find that there is something with regard to the application and the change of zone that deals positively with the stated purposes of the zoning powers as set forth in Section 8-2 of the Connecticut General Statutes. One of those standards, probably at the bedrock of zoning regulations, is benefiting considerations of public health and safety. I won't be redundant, but that gets particularly to the Spruce Street issue, the on-street parking issue, the congestion on Spruce Street. The second thing you then have to determine is the application consistent with your plan of conservation and development? So those are the two things that you really need to make the findings on. Consistency with the statutory authority granted you in 8-2, and consistency with your plan of conservation and development. With regard to the plan of conservation and development, I point out a few things. One, as I said before, the parcel directly abuts property that is zoned commercial, including the properties at 3355 and 3377 Post Road. In fact, the property formerly known as 280 Spruce Street was itself approved by this commission for a change of zone in 2004, so that that property could be used for parking in conjunction with the Post Road shopping centers. And 280 Spruce Street, after you approved the zone, subsequently merged title and use with 3377 Post Road. So you've already effected a change in the zone map in this immediate neighborhood for the same purpose, involving the same shopping centers. In addition, in terms of consistency, the property located at 230 Spruce Street, although zoned Residential B, has in fact been utilized on an uninterrupted basis as commercial, it's an office, under a variance since 1961. And indeed, the owner of that property has written a letter, which I'll present to you as well. As far as consistency with the plan itself, as far as goals and aspirations, in section 3911, under transportation, a stated goal is looking for opportunities for shared parking and elimination of curb cuts. I think the application that we present to you tonight is consistent with that, because that's exactly what we are proposing to do in this particular situation. And then lastly, and this gets to the point of time and passage of time and consideration of the zone map, let me be clear. The law affords you as a commission your greatest discretion of anything that you do when you act on a zone change. And that's the facts, and it should be. And the standards we apply are the ones I mentioned a moment ago. But when time passes and you have circumstances, first we have the circumstances of the prior approvals, the commercial existence of 3355 and 3377, the prior approval in 2004 of 280 Spruce Street. Since this application was denied in 2014, we've approved the Walgreens application involving the properties at 3533 Post Road, 3571 Post Road, and 886 Kings Highway. And your actions in doing that have been recently upheld, and I understand with finality, although I'm not involved in that, most recently by the appellate court. And also the zone change that occurred benefiting Garlic and Herbs, which is now under construction. Now, am I making a precedential argument? I am not. Every time you act on a zone change application, you have to look at that zone change application individually, and based upon your plan of conservation and development, the statute, you have to exercise your judgment, which you have great discretion to do. But what I'm respectfully pointing out on behalf of Mr. Shingle, who did not appeal the 2014 decision, who sat here, I was not the counsel, but I happened to be a counsel on the other matter that night that involved a piece of property on John Street, if you remember. A matter that raised considerable interest in the community. And these two applications, mine and Mr. Shingle's, were heard in tandem, same nights, etc. That, I'm not intimating, was why you made the decision, but it was a different circumstance, and since then, you've had the opportunity to look at the zone map in this area of town. And forget what you did in 2004, which is meaningful, but more importantly is the actions that I referred to a minute ago that have occurred since the last denial. And quite honestly and respectfully, that's the reason we came back. Not to, you know, if those decisions hadn't been made, then Mr. Shingle is a big boy. I'm like to think I'm somewhat precedent. But we felt it was worth coming back to you to say, okay, in light of the longer view over the last 2 years, and in light of the very limited purpose that we have here, providing parking for our tenants and taking parking off of Spruce Street, will you take another look at this? Now, where's the site plan? Here it is. Which one do I want to refer to? Give me the colored one. This refers more to the compliance application, but we're making a number of improvements to the site that, again, I think benefit everyone's interest. We're installing, and Mike, maybe, so I don't have to get away from it, will you just point out when I'm referring to different things, where I'm referring to them? We're going to install a new fence matching the existing along the southerly boundary line that will extend and continue the existing 6-foot-high fence, which is presently located on Spruce Street, at the rear of the existing shopping center. As I previously mentioned, we're going to eliminate the existing curb cut and driveway entrance on Spruce Street, and thereby close 256 Spruce Street entirely from ingress and egress from Spruce Street. The only access for the 18 new parking spaces, which would be created under the compliance application, will be from the existing parking lots located on the Post Road, and there will be no curb cuts on Spruce Street whatsoever. We're going to retain the existing 6-foot-high boxwood hedges and fill in all the empty spaces with mature privet hedges of approximately 8 feet in height, further buffering the existing centers from Spruce Street in a beneficial way. And the planning plan also calls for the replacement of 5 or 6 dead trees along the southerly boundary of Spruce Street with new ones approximately 8 to 10 feet tall. So those are the improvements that we'll be making, I think, to our benefit, but also to Spruce Street. Yes, sir.
Right. I don't seem to have this. Does anybody else have this sheet?
It's actually, this is just a colored graphic of what's actually shown on your site plan. All of those things are there.
Oh.
And we'll leave that with you, but it was just for...
You have copies?
Yeah, could you...
I would
could you
love
hand
to
it?
see
We
that.
do have copies of it.
Yeah. You can just hand the pack and we'll pass it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. One of the things that came up at the last hearing was concerns that the zone change now to affect 18 additional parking spaces could have impacts on future development of the adjacent parcels. I'm going to ask Mike Casado, who we asked to review this matter, to render his report to you in a minute. The bottom line of it is, though, as you'll see, the granting of the change of zone at 256 Spruce Street that we asked you to do will, as a matter of documented facts, not result in the possibility of enlargement of the existing buildings without obtaining a passel of variances, losing the drive-through, which is of great value, and even if you decided to tear down all the buildings that are on the two post road centers and start over, you still couldn't achieve a building of greater size than the square footages that exist now. He's going to walk you through that. But I think it's very important that even if these buildings that exist now were demolished and a compliant building was constructed on the site, you can only put 7,930 square feet there, as he'll walk you through. So the bottom line here is, because it's a legitimate consideration, is the zone change that we ask you to grant will not result in the feasibility of the construction of any additional retail space on these properties. But I'd like Mike to walk you through that, and he has a report which I'll hand out.
If you don't mind, a question or two before we segue here.
Yep.
You mentioned, and I know, 230 Spruce Street operating as a professional office.
Yes.
Under a variance.
Correct.
Has Mr. Shinella sought a variance for the
Can't do it
purpose here?
because the zoning regulations preclude use variances. The state statutes give municipalities the right, by their regulations, to deprive a zoning board of appeals of the authority to grant use variances.
Got it.
As a matter of planning, it's probably a good thing to do.
Well,
because
I
the
don't know
idea,
about that.
Well, sometimes, but the idea being
But I was
that,
curious, you
the
know.
idea being that if you're going to consider issues like this, you should do it through a zone change as a
Yeah.
planning function. But we can't do that.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And I agree with that. I just wasn't, I just wanted to know the history.
We, like many communities, don't provide for that. So I'm going to hand out, so you go ahead, Mike, I'll hand this out. This is
Very
just
good.
a very short report, and some visuals that I can give you.
Of course. It's relevant.
What's the current lease situation with Dunkin' Donuts and Subway?
The current lease situation with Dunkin' Donuts and Subway, Mr. Shinella is... They're long-term leases.
Long-term leases. And the retail shopping center? The retail, this corner building?
It's the blow drying. Hairdresser.
So what was the question?
What about this building?
That's which building is that?
The hairdresser.
3377, they're all under lease. 10-year leases. And that's when we're having a new restaurant, right, coming in? So to answer your question, Mr. Alessi, they're also under lease, but shorter term. Our goal, obviously, without being dramatic, is to make sure that they thrive during the period of those leaseholds, because that's what they want, that's what we want, and I know that's what the community wants. Mike.
Good evening, Michael Casado, architect. First, my apologies for the arrangement of the drawings of the rendering being north one way and the site plans being north the other. This is an older plan from a few years ago. But the analysis remains the same. I was tasked by Mr. Shinella and company for a site utilization analysis of the properties. And, you know, when we start looking at these things, we say, well, how can we use this the best way, the most efficient way, the most economical way, the safest way, and the most aesthetic way, of course. So we go through and we have some ideas. Sorry, John. So we know that we have a few of the givens. We have 7,930 square feet of existing structure on site. We know we have 53 spots that are there. We need 58. We're undersized. This is all what Attorney Fallon has already told you here. So I'm going to say, well, I'm going to take my magic architectural eraser and just white out the site. And I'm going to start from scratch. What can I do? You know, what can I do to best utilize this site? So I take a look and I say, well, once I take my magic eraser and I get rid of everything on site, I'm left with an odd-shaped site, to say the least. So I said, well, I'm going to have to try to get the best square footage and best utilization out of this. So I say I come out with two spaces where I could put structure and still make some sort of flow on the site. And there lies just for sake of argument, to keep everything all being the same, there's a footprint of 7,930 feet, which is exactly what we have on site. So all being equal, can I get more parking on site so that we can get compliance? Well, that's including our new lot at 256 Spruce, sorry. So once we now have our new setbacks, we have our, our new regulations that we have to abide by, and then we lay everything out, suddenly we realize that on one and on the other, I can get 52 and I can get 53 spots. This is a non-starter. This is a deal breaker. There's no way. It's a lateral move at best for square footage, and I still can't get the parking. So it's infeasible. It's completely infeasible. So that tells me the only way that you can get a more efficient use of the space is to keep what you have, get more parking. That's really, it's very, very simple. There's not a lot of math to it.
Let me ask you a question.
Certainly.
What happens if you came back and said we want underground parking?
Sorry?
What happens if you came back and wanted underground parking?
What if you considered, or question, did you consider underground parking?
Did not consider underground parking. That was not tasked to me. It was a surface parking solution.
So let's say we want to take another building with another level higher with underground parking, you might have the parking spots later on, no?
Well, it needs to be a different analysis.
I think the concerns with that theory is that on a site of this size, and taking into consideration the cost of underground parking,
One Sasko Hill.
that's a different situation though.
That's a smaller lot than this.
But those opportunities would exist in any event. I mean, we're talking about,
I'm just asking if it's a possibility.
no.
Why?
Well, if for one reason, we have leases with these tenants. This is two commercial centers that we're trying to preserve. There's no, and I don't think in terms of, yeah, I mean, and the configuration of the lot, I just don't think, that's a lot different than the Sasko Hill situation.
No, but if you look at the top picture, we put another level on top of that building, we put an underground parking lot underneath it, it is possible.
I suppose anything's possible. I mean, but the bottom line is you're going to have to weigh whether the likelihood of that is a probability, a possibility, or a feasible.
Okay.
Certainly not our intention.
Right, and I think that the point of the question was whether or not that was taken into consideration, and he wasn't asked to do that.
And it's not.
I think there's a financial feasibility study that would have to go along with that
Yeah.
which would probably also preclude the construction of this.
Right, no, that's
Just thinking about the ingress and egress that's there on the site and how you'd have to deal with that, it's like,
right.
I can't see it being a good option.
All right. Commissioner Barrett?
Sorry, so I'm just kind of missing the main point of your argument here. Saying that if they tore everything down, they couldn't really build anything bigger than what's there due to the configuration of the site.
And still be compliant.
And if they had these, how many additional parking spaces on 256?
Is it 18?
18? So even if they had those 18 plus whatever they could fit on site, they couldn't put a
That's
bigger
correct.
building just based upon the configuration of the
And the new
site.
zoning regulations that we have to abide by creating a new site.
So if you walk through Mike's written one-page summary.
Yeah, I could-
I mean, that's the point he makes, that if you want to say, oh, yeah, now, but what happens if we grant this zone change, and then they tear down all the buildings and they start over, and leaving out the issue of underground parking, which is not our intention, nor do I think feasible on this site, but the fact is, if you leave that out, and you have the setback issues and other issues related to the coverage requirements and so on and so forth, we end up with exactly the same square footage we had to begin with. So the point I was making...
And still non-compliant parking.
Right. This zone change doesn't affect a reasonable possibilities of increase in retail space on these combined properties. Okay?
Correct.
Thanks. I do have letters of support. I know there's a number of people here who want to see themselves. I'll just pass these down. These are three letters, I believe. One is from Paulson, which is the accounting firm that operates under the variance, 61. The other is from Castano Pizzeria. And then there's a third one from Southport Zone and Inc., which is Dunkin' Donuts / Baskin Robbins.
It's a great name, Southport Donuts.
So, by way of summarizing, before I'd like to make sure the public gets a chance to talk, let's talk about the concerns that were raised last time and that I think may have been raised in at least one letter I saw that came into you recently. Once the zone is changed, the land could be used for something other than a parking lot. Well, rebuttal number one to that is the analysis that Mr. Casado just testified to. Even if the land were added that we asked you to change the zone to, no additional square footage by way of retail space could be created. Second argument, as a practical matter, what is driving this application is the need for permanent additional on-site parking to benefit the existing retail uses. And the third rebuttal to that point, which is probably the most important one from a legal perspective, is any theoretical subsequent proposal of any kind would require a full special permit and site plan approval review at a public hearing before this commission. And thus the commission, this commission, would continue to exercise the very considerable discretion that you have under the special permit standards in determining whether the proposed alternative use of the property satisfies the special permit criteria for approval, thus providing, with your continued due diligence, an opportunity to ensure that any hypothetical future use of the property is in the best interest of the town and the neighborhood. This was precisely the same argument, one of the same arguments, that the opponents of the Walgreens application made. Oh, we don't really mind, but what if Walgreens doesn't come? Interesting how that may work out, but the correct answer that this commission employed was just what I just said now. No change of use could be undertaken from that retail use without a full special permit here. Same thing with us. Whatever hypotheticals, notwithstanding Mr. Casado's presentation, which I think is conclusive, if anybody wants to do anything but put 18 parking spaces there, they have a full special permit and site plan application that comes before you, and it will have to meet those standards. Hey, wait a minute. The fact is, there are these buildings immediately across the street. They're all residential houses. I'll let them speak for themselves. But I think there's overwhelming support for this application because it self-evidently benefits the interests of the residents of Spruce Street by the removal of the on-street parking, the additional landscaping, and the closing off of Spruce Street conclusively from any retail ingress or egress. You're encroaching on residential properties. Look, that gets back to what I said at the beginning. First of all, we are immediately adjacent to the two residential centers that we intend to share the parking with. Secondly, you've already acted in 2004 to do exactly what we ask you to do now for the benefit of these two centers. And thirdly, you have, in the interest of the passage of time, the subsequent amendments to the zone maps that occurred with regard to the Walgreens property, Garlic and Herbs, and even the Dowd property, which occurred before 2014, but I think is reasonable. So you're not encroaching into any existing residential areas. This is a vacant piece of land, and you're enhancing parking to the benefit of the tenants and the people of Spruce Street by inclusion of that vacant piece of property onto two shopping centers that front on the Post Road. Sounds familiar. Conclusion, I think the legal standard here with regard to the zone change would direct you, we hope, to a favorable consideration of this application, because it is consistent with the statutorily stated purpose of zoning, Section 8-2, preserving and enhancing the public health and welfare. It's consistent with the plan of conservation and development, that being certain provisions of your plan, your master plan, but also your actions over the last years in terms of considerations of the zone map, which is part of the plan of conservation and development. You're going to add further off-street parking that's needed desperately by these tenants. You're going to remove on-street parking from Spruce Street. You're going to make the existing shopping center more conforming to the number of spaces that it requires, which is a goal of zoning. And you're going to close off Spruce Street, if you want to talk about doing the right thing for the residential neighbors, entirely with regard to the commercial activity that fronts on the Post Road. This is a good application. It's an application that respectfully warrants your reconsideration, and we appreciate your time and attention in doing so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any member of the public wish to be heard on this application?
Jack Imes, resident of Southport, the other end of Spruce Street, representing Sasquatog Village Improvement. We are opposed based on encroachment. The same proposed zone change was considered and denied, as has been stated. The TPZ's plan of conservation and development for Southport clearly states, quote, encroachment of commercial zones into residential areas should be discouraged. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public?
Hi, I'm September Sirico. Good? Okay. I'm a business owner at 3397 Post Road. I own Blow Dry. We have a great location, a successful business that we work very hard at. I have primarily a female staff, and they're in a little bit of a precarious situation when they have to park on Spruce. It's a busy street due to it being a cut-through for 95. It's not lit at night. My employees do carry a fair amount of stuff in and out of the salon with them, their tools, their bags, their working materials for the day. And at night, when it's dark and they have to walk to their cars, Spruce Street is very narrow, and it's just simply not that safe. I also was a tenant on Spruce Street as a resident, so I can speak for being a business owner that backs up to Spruce and also a resident there. It's very difficult to back in and out of your driveway when the street is lined with cars. Almost impossible to back out and then turn around to go in the direction you'd like to go.
I'm sorry, did you say you were also a resident of Spruce Street?
I was previously a resident,
Oh,
yes,
okay,
at
was.
291 Spruce Street, which backs right up to my business location now. When it snows, that presents another problem on Spruce with parking, and as well as space limitation for vehicles to get down the road, whether it be a school bus or an emergency vehicle. And we have a primarily female clientele as well, and the limitations on parking make it difficult for our clientele to get in and out of the salon, particularly when they have children with them. Like I said, because they're female, during the day, after school, they may bring 2 to 3 children in with them to the salon, and it's just not safe. The parking lot would eliminate a lot of these issues. It would be well lit, it would be off Spruce Street, it would connect directly into the commercial area, so it would eliminate issues for us from a business angle and also from a residential angle. And lastly, if you haven't taken a spin by the area, I encourage you to do so. The empty lot backs up to commercial space, has a commercial space to the left of it, and a commercial space across the street from it. So though part of the street is residential, it is primarily commercial. So I do believe that the zoning for it is just simply outdated. That's it. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Any other members of the public wish to be heard?
Hi, my name is Douglas Romero. I have been living on Spruce Street with my wife and family for 15 years. And I was here in 2004 when the lot across the street from us wanted to be turned into a parking lot, and you guys approved that after I opposed it, and you approved it anyway. 2014, I come here in support to have the parcel in question turned to a parking lot, and you guys denied it.
It's all your
So-
fault.
Yeah, could be. It could be.
Seriously.
So, I mean, I don't understand exactly why you guys make one decision in 2004 and then 10 years later make the exact opposite. It makes no sense. Okay, the street is very narrow. It cannot accommodate all the parking, and there's about 10 to 12 cars that park there on the side every single day. School buses have problems getting down there. When it snows, it is a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. And the fact that you guys still now, 12 years later, still can't get this right is very sad. It is. You know, and I'm sorry to say that, but it's very frustrating to come here now 3 times to try and get this done, and you guys can't make up your mind. It's really sad. And this is what you represent our town. Very disappointed. So hopefully you guys can actually make the right decision this time, because I'm just at my wit's end. You know, you're supposed to help us and, be our voice and do things for us, and you don't. You do one thing and then you do the exact opposite. It's unbelievable. It really is. So.
I would just like to add
You
that
are?
my name is Alicia Romero. I'm at 279 Spruce Street. My husband Doug. Since Center Street also became a one-way from 95 to the Post Road, those cars now also turn on our street, with the hair salon place having the girls that blow dry, their employees, park alongside of the fence. Then we have all these cars coming off of the Post Road onto Spruce Street. It's hard for cars now coming from Rennell Drive and cars coming from the Post Road that have to kind of park off or pull over to one side so the other car can come down the street. It's overcrowded. It's a very narrow street. Cars whiz by that street. I'm constantly telling my children to get out of the street because it's too busy, and the street is not in a good place right now for the cars to be parked there. I mean, we've been living there for 15 years and it's gotten worse. So we are hoping tonight that you do understand, and even like September said, go by the street and see how busy it is, whether it's early Sunday morning or late Thursday night. No matter what time of day you go, it's a very busy street. So thank you very much and have a good night.
Thank you for your comments. Any other members of the public wish to be heard?
Good evening. My name is Betsy Petroni, and I'm an employee at Vision Center Associates, which is one of the properties in this strip mall. And it is imperative that we have more parking. The parking is available, we just need to make it happen. There is not ample parking. It's utterly ridiculous. It's not safe for anybody. We need it for not only our staff, but we need it for all of our customers and our patients and everyone that's coming into the area. And that's about all I have to say. So please consider it.
Thank you
It's
for your
very
comments.
important. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Any other members of the public? Yep, we got one more. At least one more.
Good evening. I think I'm the last.
Maybe 2.
Thank you for staying late to hear this. I think this is really important. My name is Carmen Wenkoff. I am one of the franchise owners of the Subway restaurant, co-located beside Dunkin' Donuts. And unlike our friends on Spruce Street, we've only been around for the last year. We actually became the franchise owners after the Subway had closed around this time last year. So I actually I run the technology at Subway headquarters in Milford, Chief Information Officer, but I live in the area, and And driving home there one day, seeing the restaurant closed, I started looking into the stats. And just to put it in perspective, that restaurant used to do about $12,000 a week. When it had closed, it was doing about $7,000. And so being on the management team at headquarters, I thought we could make an example of this and turn it around. And so we took it over. My wife manages it. And almost a year later, we've learned a lot of lessons and have made a lot of observations and have been actually trying to use it as a bit of a flagship restaurant, making changes that you won't see in any other Subway restaurant, and a lot more hopefully to come. Bottom line, we've run it in the red for 10 out of the 11 months that it's been open. So we had a little more stamina than the Be Fresh folks, but it's tough. And what we realized is that every single customer counts, and we've observed a lot. I'm not blaming it on the parking lot why the other restaurant closed, but it certainly doesn't help. And we see over and over again customers coming in, can't find parking, they're trying to get in, and then they leave. We do have a lot of employees who are parking in the lot from both Dunkin' and Subway. Those employees actually do take up about 6 or 7 spots in the existing restaurant. And it just becomes unsafe, let alone losing business. What happens is a lot of, especially the larger trucks who try to pull in, or any cars when the lot is full, they'll pull up right at the side of the street. You may see it if you go by there. And we've observed, well, we're there, 3 accidents from cars trying to pull out of that lot, and either because they don't have good visibility and they're trying to take a left, or even taking a right sometimes. When the cars are parked along the street, it becomes really unsafe. I've had my own vehicle run into by one of our employees who was trying to squeeze in to one of the lots there. So it's just tight, and we've compensated by really trying to be involved in the community by going outside of the parking lot and outside of the restaurant to garner sales, and we would just ask for your assistance. I think everyone in that shopping area needs it, and we're personally committed to really trying to turn that particular restaurant around. I'm still hoping to make it a flagship location for us, and hopefully it'll be a great example for the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, and I appreciate your staying around for late hour. My name is Gaylord Meyer. I live at 51 Spruce Street. I have been a resident of this town for 38 years. I frequently do shop at that shopping center, blow dry. I've been there many times. I've never had a problem getting a parking spot. I have gone to the pizza joint and gotten a great pizza there, never had a problem. I get my eyes checked at Vision, never had a problem. Taking that into consideration, Mr. Fallon brought up Walgreens, and then he brought up John Street. And the reason they were denied is because he was trying to change residential into commercial. And it has been in our charter that we try not to do that so that we don't lose that sense of community. And that was the reason that I believe that it was denied. I think that the tenants that have taken a lease in that development there have full knowledge of what the parking is when they sign the lease. So they know full well what they're up against or what the issues might be. It's kind of like memory lane when we were fighting issues on 95, and they said, well, you moved on to Spruce Street, it goes with the territory. And I think that it's important that we continue to keep our communities, to keep our village, to keep our residents. And I don't believe that there's been a hardship proven here, other than the fact that it'd be a lot more convenient for, they feel, their customers. But I've been their customer for over 38 years, not 38 because they weren't there 38 years ago. But it's not been an issue of parking. So well, thank you very much for your time, and good night.
Thank you very much for your comments. Anybody else? Any other members of the public? Nope? Very good.
I'll be brief, and again, I too thank you for staying beyond your curfew, but I won't hold you for more than 5 minutes, I promise. I don't doubt what Mrs. Meyer says, but I'll be happy to take her on a tour. I don't know when she goes to these places, and I'm sure she goes there at certain times a day or 11, but I'll tell you, we have a significant parking issue, and I think it's a little unfair to hardworking people who are making a living, trying to make a living, say, hey, you knew what you're getting into, so you're running the black. You're running the red 11 months out of 12. Shouldn't have signed the lease. I don't think that's in the spirit of Fairfield or our plans for economic development. I understand Mr. Romero's frustration, but Mr. Schnell and I also appreciate the difficult job that this commission has. And we know you look at every single case, zone change or otherwise, that comes before you on a case-by-case basis, and you try to make the best judgment you can for the town. So we're not suggesting anything about 2014, but we're looking forward, and we're saying between what's happened in 2014 and what happened and where we are today, as I said, this respectfully warrants your reconsideration. Great deal of respect for Sasquatch and the work it does to make Southport so very special. But if you want to talk about encroachment into residential areas, talk to the people who live directly across the street from this center, like Mr. Romero and his wife. To say that this application embodies an encroachment into a residential area because historically there's a Residence B label on this 7,000 square foot property that abuts these two shopping centers that abut the Post Road, strikes me as not realistic.
There's on-street parking on Spruce Street, is there not?
There certainly is.
And that's what they're complaining about.
But this would be significantly reduce that.
Why do we think that's the case?
Because we know who parks there.
But if those cars aren't parked there, how do we know that other cars won't?
Because they're generated by our center, by and large. Not exclusively, but by and large.
And do we know whether others seek to park on Spruce Street, but can't because there are cars parked there now? And so when we create this parking lot, and those employees are now no longer parking on Spruce Street, but now going into the parking lot, those other people who were looking for spaces for other businesses down the road or what have you, aren't going to simply be parking on Spruce Street. There's on-street parking signage marked on Spruce Street.
We think because of the proximity of this center, the primary generator of that demand on Spruce Street for on-street parking is our center. And one thing we know is that if we have these 18 additional spaces and we instruct our tenants to make sure their employees park there, and if we close off Spruce Street so there's no ingress and egress, that it can only improve the situation. Does that mean Spruce Street's going to be vacant? I don't know.
And respectfully, that's kind of my question, right? Because you got a couple of different primary arguments, but one of the primary arguments here is that there are people parking on Spruce Street and it's causing an issue. Even if we do this, are we sure that we're going to be alleviating parking on Spruce Street?
Logic would tell us that it can only improve that situation, and the residents who live on that street and see who comes and goes and where they come and go from every day tell us that's the case, okay? But my primary argument really is a very legalistic one, okay? For the point to be made that what we propose to do constitutes an encroachment into a residential area gets to the heart of what you have to look at when you make a zone change. 8-2, Plan of Conservation Development. I get it. But what I'm saying is, respectfully, that's a specious argument for a 7,000 square foot piece of vacant land that directly abuts the Post Road and two commercial shopping centers, where the applicant is coming in and saying, we're going to use it for parking and we're going to close it off both physically and in terms of vegetation and create, isolation from residential areas. I would suggest to you that what this application in its heart essence is is not the encroachment into a residential area, it is the protection of a residential area. Ms. Meyer says, keep our residential areas residential. Couldn't agree more. And when have I brought a zone change before you to zone commercial a residential neighborhood? Never do it. Look like a fool, taking people's money. It's not right. This is not that. But the real legal argument that I'll leave you with is, over the time frame, starting in 2004, and going up to today's date, the plan of conservation and development involves two things. I should have said this. It involves the document that you call your master plan, but it also involves your zone map. If you study the cases, they say that the plan of conservation and development embodies the master plan and your zone map. You have looked at similar situations in 2004 and 2015 and 2016 in this very immediate area. And you've granted the zone changes. And you've done so notwithstanding the fact that some people, very much entitled to their point of view, said, oh, you're encroaching on the residential zones. But you correctly said, no, we're not. Look at the zone map. Look at where this property abuts. Look at what we're going to affect if we grant this zone change of this vacant piece of property that's basically never going to be used for a house. Somebody going to build a house on this? I wouldn't think so. So all we're asking you to do, and as we've respected your discretion, we respect your discretion now. But I think in legal terms, and also in equitable terms, it is appropriate to take a second look at this application. Grant the zone change so that we can use this for 18 more parking spaces, which our tenants need, and which can only benefit Spruce Street, although it may not solve their problem.
My point was just we simply don't know. I don't think I know the
But it
answer to
certainly
that
can't
question.
hurt.
Does
It
anyone
certainly
have any
can't.
questions for Mr. Fallon? I have one.
Mm-hmm.
Are there assigned spaces to the establishments? In other words, does Blow Dry get these 5, and
No.
Toscano get these 6, and Subway get those 15?
No, they don't. And, I've always advised clients that in Fairfield, we had a situation many years ago where a client of mine was doing that and had a bit of a zoning enforcement issue because our regulations don't provide for assigned spaces. And I think that's still the case. So what I was told at the time was, look, when we approve a project, we don't approve 5 spaces for Joe's Shoes and 6 spaces for... And you can't go around doing that. So the answer is we don't. And
Well, honestly, I don't think I've seen it around town.
yeah, every once in a while you'll see it, but not on a major scale. We don't...
You know where? Citibank, in the Brick Walk, they have the sign saying for Citibank.
Yeah,
for
they do,
customers
and
only.
a couple of cleaners around town, they
Right.
have one space where, but the bottom line is we don't do it. I don't think legally we can do it, but I don't think we have to do it. If we get these additional spaces, it'll be a great help. But that's not really the focus. I'm going to shut up.
Yeah.
The real focus is, look at your zone map, look at the logic, decide if time and change conditions warrant reconsideration.
Very
I hope
good.
you will.
Thank you very much. I'll close the public hearing on this item, and I'm going to adjourn the hearing.